Across the windswept hills, drowned valleys, and iron-gray coastlines of Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, there lies a land where the boundary between worlds has never fully sealed. Here, the veil between the living and the unseen feels thin, fragile, like mist drifting across an ancient stone circle at dawn. This is a landscape shaped not only by wind and rain, but by memory. Every bog pool, every standing stone, every ruined tower carries the echo of a story once whispered by firelight. For thousands of years, the Celtic people spoke of beings who existed alongside humanity, yet beyond it. Creatures not born of pure imagination, but of lived experience, fear, reverence, and survival. These were not merely monsters lurking in the dark. They were manifestations of death and destiny, labor and reward, desire and loss. They embodied the wildness of the natural world and the moral laws that governed human life within it. Tonight, we step into that twilight realm. We journey beyond folklore as entertainment and into folklore as worldview, where spirits mourn before death arrives, where household helpers labor unseen, where the sea takes human shape, and where ancient gods retreat into the hills to become something older and stranger still. Our journey begins not with a sight, but with a sound. Imagine a quiet night in rural Ireland. The fields lie dark beneath a sky strewn with stars. No wind stirs the hedgerows. No hoofbeats echo on the road. Then, without warning, a cry tears through the stillness. A sound so filled with sorrow, it seems to drain warmth from the air itself. It is not the cry of an animal. It is not human, yet it carries the unmistakable weight of human grief. It rises, falls, and trembles, sometimes seeming to come from just beyond the window, sometimes from miles away across the bog. This is the cry of the Banshee. Her name, from the Irish being sea, woman of the fairy mound, ties her directly to the ancient Sidhe, the burial mounds and hollow hills believed to be gateways to the otherworld. These mounds were not graves alone. They were thresholds, places where the Tuatha De Danann, the old gods of Ireland, retreated after their defeat by mortal invaders. The Banshee is not a ghost in the Christian sense, nor a demon, nor a wandering spirit. She is a liminal being, a guardian bound to bloodlines older than recorded history. She does not cry for everyone. Her lament is reserved for certain ancient families, those whose names echo through Irish history: the Onals, the O'Briens, the O'Connors, the McCarthys. To be attended by a Banshee was, paradoxically, a mark of nobility. It meant your lineage was old enough, pure enough, important enough to warrant a herald from the otherworld. Her cry was not a threat. It was an announcement, a solemn acknowledgement that a link in the ancestral chain was about to break. Her voice could take many forms. Sometimes it was a piercing shriek, sharp as shattered glass, setting dogs howling and freezing blood in the veins. At other times, it was a low, keening sob, a sound of such intimate sorrow it felt like overhearing grief not meant for mortal ears. In many accounts, she sang the Coened, the traditional Irish funeral lament, weaving poetry and melody together in a song of loss before death had even occurred. The archives of the Irish Folklore Commission preserve hundreds of sworn testimonies. Men and women who claimed, without hesitation, that they heard the Banshee's cry on the very night a relative died. Sometimes that death occurred miles away, even across oceans. Distance did not matter. Blood did. This belief was deeply rooted in a real cultural practice, keening. Well into the 19th century, Irish funerals were attended by professional mourners. Asterisk being Coent asterisk, women who wailed, chanted, and sang the deeds of the dead. Their voices transformed private grief into communal ritual. The Banshee is the supernatural echo of this tradition, the first and eternal keener, beginning the morning before human hearts even know there is cause. When she is seen, her appearance is famously inconsistent. She may appear as a pale young woman with long silver hair and eyes red from centuries of weeping, wrapped in a gray cloak that shifts like fog. Or she may appear as an ancient hag, bent and skeletal, her sorrow etched deep into her face. Often she is seen combing her hair, a detail that gave rise to a powerful folk warning. To find a comb on a lonely path and take it is to invite disaster, for it belongs to the Banshee, and she does not forgive theft. Yet for all the terror she inspires, the Banshee is not malevolent. She does not cause death. She does not harm the living. She stands at the threshold between worlds as a witness, a mourner, and a reminder that death is not chaos. It is passage. From sorrow, we turn now to mischief. When modern audiences think of a leprechaun, they imagine a cheerful caricature, a tiny man in green, smiling beside a pot of gold. This image, born of Victorian illustration and commercial myth-making, bears little resemblance to the older, darker, and far stranger figure found in genuine folklore. To find the true leprechaun, we must travel back to medieval Ireland, to the saga Ectra Fergusa Mycledi. In this tale, King Fergus falls asleep by the shore and awakens to find himself dragged toward the sea by three small but immensely powerful water spirits, known as the Lookerpain, little bodies. These beings are strong enough to kill a king. Only quick action saves him. In exchange for their freedom, they grant him supernatural gifts. These are not comic figures. They are elemental. Over centuries, this aquatic spirit migrated inland, shrinking in power but gaining cunning. By the early modern period, the leprechaun had become a solitary fairy cobbler. His craft suited his nature. Meticulous, repetitive, secretive. The faint tap-tap-tap of his hammer was often the only sign of his presence, a sound that tempted humans into pursuit. Why cobbler? Because the fairy host danced endlessly, wearing out their shoes in nightly revels. The leprechaun was their tireless artisan, working alone, hoarding wealth not for pleasure, but for control. His gold was never easy to win. Whether a self-renewing silver coin or a hidden pot of treasure, it was always bound to vigilance. Look away, even for a heartbeat, and the fairy vanished. These tales were moral lessons disguised as tricks. Fortune demands attention, discipline, and restraint. But this careful craftsman had a darker twin, the Cluricaun. Where the leprechaun worked, the Cluricaun drank. A cellar-dwelling spirit, he haunted breweries and wine stores. Treated well, he guarded the household's alcohol. Offended, he spoiled entire vats and rode livestock through the night in drunken rampages. One famous tale ends with a homeowner moving away, only to hear a voice from inside a barrel. We're traveling together. Two spirits. One lesson, thrift and excess, order and chaos. From the warmth of the hearth and the morning cries of the ancestral dead, our journey moves outward, toward the edges of the Celtic world, where land thins into water and certainty dissolves into shadow. In the old beliefs, danger did not always roar or strike. Often, it waited quietly at boundaries, the shoreline at dusk, the road after sunset, the marsh where solid ground became a lie. The sea, above all, was never simply water. It was alive. It was memory. It was hunger. Along the jagged coasts of Ireland, Scotland, and the Northern Isles, fishermen once spoke of seals that watched them from the waves, not with animal indifference, but with unmistakable human awareness. Their eyes lingered too long. Their stillness felt deliberate. These were the Selkies.by day. They appeared as seals basking on darkened rocks, their bodies slick with salt and tide. But when night fell and the shoreline emptied, they shed their skins like cloaks and stepped on a land as men and women of unearthly beauty. Their hair shimmered like wet kelp in moonlight. Their voices carried the slow rhythm of the ocean itself. The island communities of the Hebrides, Orkney, and Shetland, Selkies were not children's stories. They were neighbors of another realm, rare, respected, and feared. To encounter one was to stand at the edge of happiness and ruin at the same time. Many tales speak of mortal men who stole a Selkie woman's seal skin and hid it away, knowing that without it she could not return to the sea. Deprived of her true form, she would remain on land, marry, bear children, and live quietly among humans for years, sometimes decades. Yet these stories never end in peace. One day, inevitably, she would find the hidden skin. The moment her fingers touched it, Memory surged back like a rising tide. The pull of the sea erased every promise made on land. Sometimes she paused only to weep over her sleeping children. Sometimes she vanished without farewell. Islanders later claimed to see seals watching the shore with mournful, knowing eyes, lingering where human homes once stood. The lesson was cruel and clear. What belongs to the sea cannot be owned. Love built on captivity will always drown. Yet where Selkies were tragic and gentle, another creature of the northern waters inspired only dread in the windswept Orkney Islands. People once feared a being so monstrous that even speaking its name felt dangerous. This was the Nuckelavee that it was said to resemble a skinless man fused to the back of a gigantic horse. Its raw flesh glistened beneath the sunless sky. Yellow veins pulsed visibly. Black blood flowed freely. A single burning, I glared with hatred toward all living things. Its breath carried disease, and its presence alone was enough to rot crops and poison livestock. The Nuckelavee did not trick or tempt. It destroyed. Droughts, plagues, and sudden deaths were blamed on its passage. Unlike many spirits, it could not be bargained with. It knew no mercy. Only one force restrained it: fresh water. Streams, rivers, even heavy rain were believed to weaken it. In this detail lies an ancient truth: the eternal struggle between saltwater chaos and life-giving freshwater order. If the sea was a realm of transformation, then the road at night was a place of judgment. Across Ireland, travelers feared the sound of hooves behind them on lonely roads, not because of bandits, but because the rider might already be dead. Through the darkness rode the Dullahan, clad in black and mounted upon a coal dark horse. The Dullahan carried his own severed head beneath one arm. Its eyes darted endlessly, scanning the countryside with an unblinking stare. Its mouth twisted into a corpse grin capable of calling out a person's name. When the Dullahan stopped riding, someone died he did not chase. He did not threaten. He arrived, announced the end, and departed. Doors and gates flew open before him, for no lock could bar death's messenger. Those who dared to watch were punished, sometimes struck blind by a whip said to be woven from a human spine. Unlike the Banshee, who mourned death before it came, the Dullahan embodied inevitability. There was no sorrow in him, only purpose. Not all spirits of the night took such solid form. In bogs, marshes, and moorlands, travelers reported distant lights hovering just above the ground, flickering, swaying, beckoning. Known as will-o'-the-wisps, jack-o'-lanterns, or spunkies, these lights tempted the unwary from safe paths into sucking mud and endless dark. Some believed they were mischievous faeries delighting in confusion. Others claimed they were restless souls denied heaven and hell alike. Whatever their origin, the result was always the same. Those who followed rarely returned. Here, folklore became survival. The land itself warned its people: do not wander, do not trust the glow, do not stray from what is known. And then there were the hounds. Across the Scottish Highlands, shepherds spoke of a massive black dog whose howl rolled through valleys like a funeral bell. This was the Tsu Thing, as large as a calf, with fur darker than night and eyes glowing like embers. It roamed the hills at dusk. Its bark was said to be heard 3 times. At the first, unease. At the second, certainty. At the third, death. Some believed it was a fairy guardian, herding human souls as others herded sheep. Others saw it as a remnant of ancient death gods, diminished over centuries into a spectral beast. Either way, its presence marked moments when the world's boundary thinned. When these beings are viewed together, a pattern emerges that, in Celtic belief, danger was not random. It had rules: geography, logic. Fresh water repelled monsters. Roads carried fate. Marshes punished carelessness. Death announced itself before arriving. The world was alive, and it watched human behavior closely. Just say continue with part 3 when you're ready. A night deepened in the Celtic imagination. Fear no longer came from distant shores or wandering roads. It rose from the ground itself, from graves that would not stay sealed, from faces once loved, now returned with hunger in their eyes. Death, in these stories, was not always an ending. Sometimes it was an invitation to in the villages of Ireland. People once feared not the dead who rested peacefully, but those who returned unchanged in body, yet emptied of warmth. These are not ghosts. They cast shadows. They left footprints. And they remembered how to knock point. One such being was the dirge dash Nuckelavee day. She lay beneath the earth, sealed in stone. By night, she walked. Legends tell of a woman forced into a cruel marriage, her youth consumed by abuse and neglect. Love was denied her. Mercy never came. When she finally died, some say by starvation, others by despair, her suffering did not end. It transformed. She rose from her grave pale and beautiful, her lips stained crimson with stolen blood. The dirge did not tear flesh or strike in rage. She seduced. Her voice was soft, her presence intoxicating. Men followed her willingly into the dark, only to be found lifeless at dawn, drained of vitality rather than violently slain to stop her. Villagers placed heavy stones upon her grave and turned them at each festival, ensuring she remained pinned to the earth. Even in death, she required restraint. Her tale carried a warning older than Christianity itself. Suffering denied justice does not fade. It returns. But the dirge was not alone in her hunger. Petite river crossings and shallow fords. Travelers sometimes glimpsed a woman kneeling in the water, her hair trailing downstream, her clothes soaked and torn. She appeared harmless, even sorrowful, washing blood-stained garments with slow, deliberate movements. This was the Bean Nye, the washer at the ford. She was not washing clothes at all. Each garment belonged to someone who would soon die. Those who recognized their own clothing among the sodden fabric understood their fate had already been chosen. Some tried to flee. Others fell to their knees in prayer. Yet there were rules. If one approached her silently from behind and stood between her and the water, she was forced to answer questions truthfully. She might grant wishes. She might reveal the manner of death. But every answer carried a price, for knowledge itself was dangerous. Like the Banshee, the Bean Nye did not kill. She prepared. She confirmed. She reminded mortals that fate moved forward regardless of fear, in Scotland and Ireland alike. The restless dead sometimes gathered not alone, but in terrible numbers. They were called the Sluach dusk. People were warned to close their windows facing west, for that was the direction of dying light, and the path the slough traveled. They were said to be the spirits of the unforgiven dead, those denied rest, denied rights, denied belonging. They moved as a host, a dark murmuring mass in the sky, whispering, clawing, searching for the living. The sick were their favorite prey. A moment of weakness was all that was needed. Entire households blamed sudden deaths on a window left unshuttered, a prayer forgotten, a boundary left unguarded. Here, fear became discipline. Folklore taught vigilance not through hope, but through consequence. Yet not all horrors descended from the sky or rose from graves. Some walked beside humanity for generations, unseen, bound not by malice but by labor, in the quiet of Scottish farms and Irish homes. People once left out bowls of milk or pieces of bread by the hearth, not for charity, for survival. These offerings were meant for the brownie. Small, rough, and dark-haired, the brownie labored at night, completing chores left unfinished, threshing grain, cleaning hearths, tending livestock. He asked for no payment, only respect. Gratitude was shown through food, never wages. To offer clothing was an insult. When given garments, the brownie took it as dismissal. Some vanished forever. Others turned violent, becoming boggles, malicious spirits that smashed tools, spoiled food, and terrorized households that had forgotten humility. The message was precise. Balance matters. Reward without exploitation. Help without ownership. As Christianity spread, many of these beings did not disappear. They diminished. They changed. God shrank into faeries into goblins. Yet one ancient race lingered beneath the surface of every story. They were the Tuatha De Danann, Before humans ruled the land, before saints and kings, the Tuatha Dé Danann walked openly across Ireland. They were not spirits, but gods, masters of magic, craft, poetry, and war. When mortal invaders arrived, the Tuatha were defeated not by force, but by inevitability. They retreated underground into the hollow hills and ancient mounds. There, they became the Ow's Sea, the fairy folk, powerful, immortal, and no longer bound to human morality. From them flowed the rules of the unseen world. Never eat fairy food, never accept gifts lightly, never step into a ring of mushrooms, and never forget that time does not move the same beyond the veil. Those who broke these laws returned changed, or not at all. Across these stories, a truth becomes impossible to ignore. The Celtic world was not divided into good and evil. It was divided into balance and imbalance, respect and disrespect, awareness and ignorance. Monsters did not exist without cause. They were reactions to cruelty, to neglect, to arrogance, to forgotten boundaries. As the old gods retreated into hill and hollow, the land itself began to remember what they had been. Lakes darkened, rivers twisted, mountains acquired hunger. In Celtic belief, not every god faded quietly into folklore. Some were trapped, some were punished, some endured by becoming something else entirely, i.e. the deep waters of Ireland and Wales. People spoke of creatures older than villages, older than kings. Beasts bound to lakes as both prison and throne. One such creature was the Afanc. Descriptions of the Afanc vary, as all ancient monsters do, but its nature remains constant. It was massive, scaled, serpentine or crocodilian in form, with a body capable of dragging entire oxen into the depths. It dwelled in deep pools and narrow rivers where water ran dark even at noon. The Afanc was not a predator that hunted for food. It hunted for dominance. Entire valleys feared its presence. Livestock vanished. Fishermen were dragged beneath the surface without warning. In some versions, the Afanc was once a king or giant cursed for arrogance, transformed into a water beast as punishment. In others, it was a surviving fragment of pre-human chaos, something that never belonged to the ordered world at all. Only heroes or saints could defeat it, and even then, victory came at great cost. The water itself resisted their efforts, as if protecting its own. The lesson was clear: some evils cannot be reasoned with. They must be endured, or sealed away. In Wales, another water beast haunted the margins of lakes and marshes. Smaller than the Afanc, but far stranger. This was the water leaper. It was said to resemble an oversized frog or toad, equipped with a long tail like a serpent and sometimes bat-like wings. It had no legs. Instead, it moved by leaping unnaturally through air and water alike. The water leaper was blamed for broken dams, flooded fields, and drowned travelers. Its grotesque form reflected its nature, something that did not belong to any single realm. Not land, not water, not sky. Creatures like this were warnings against liminality itself. To exist between worlds was to invite danger. Not all ancient beings remained monstrous. Some were diminished into rulers of shadowed courts, their divine authority transformed into fairy sovereignty. These were the kings and queens of the otherworld, in Ireland. The fairy host was said to ride at night, passing through villages in invisible processions. Mortals who interfered were punished. Mortals who watched too closely were taken. Their king was variously named Finvara, among them a figure of immense beauty and terrible pride. He ruled not through cruelty, but through inevitability. To attract his attention was to lose one's place in the human world. Under his rule, time unraveled. A night of dancing might equal a century. A single sip of fairy wine could sever every mortal bond forever. Where gods once demanded worship, fairies demanded caution. And then there were those who were neither fairy nor beast, but something closer to legend fossilized into fear. Across Scotland, people whispered of Ellen Trechand, a triple-headed terror born of ancient myth. Ellen Trechand was said to breathe fire and devastate entire regions in a single night. Fields burned. Strongholds collapsed. Even the Tuatha Dé Danann feared it. Its story survives only in fragments, suggesting something older than folklore itself, a memory of catastrophe given form and teeth. Here, myth approaches history. Perhaps Ellen Tretchend was once a comet, a wildfire, or a forgotten war. Or perhaps it truly was a creature erased by time. In Celtic storytelling, the distinction hardly mattered. Meaning survived even when facts dissolved. Yet even as horrors stalked land and water, the household remained sacred, except when it did not. In the Isle of Man, people feared the Maudé Dew. A massive black dog haunted Peel Castle, appearing at night in corridors lit by torchlight. Guards who encountered it were found dead by morning, their faces frozen in terror, their hair turned white. Eventually, one man challenged the beast. He followed it into the dark. He returned alive, but silent. 3 days later, he died without speaking a word. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. What binds all these beings together is not malice alone, but consequence. The Celtic world was a network of rules older than law. Break them, and the land responded. Disrespect water, and it swallowed you. Challenge what should not be challenged, and you were erased. As centuries passed, the world grew heavier. Forests thinned, roads widened, stone replaced soil. The old beings did not vanish all at once. They starved. Magic did not end in fire or conquest. It faded through neglect, disbelief, and hunger. And in that hunger, new spirits were born. Among the most feared was the Feargorda. He appeared as a tall, skeletal figure, draped in tattered rags, his skin stretched tight over bone. His eyes were hollow, endless pits of need. He wandered roadsides and fields during times of famine, leaning on a staff, begging for food. Those who gave him even a crust of bread were blessed with abundance. Those who turned him away found their land cursed. Crops failed, animals died, and hunger followed them like a shadow. The Feargorda was not merely a spirit. He was famine given shape, memory made flesh. A reminder carved into folklore, so starvation would never be forgotten, never dismissed as chance or misfortune. To refuse kindness was to invite catastrophe. In the wild places still untouched by plow and prayer, animals themselves carried mythic weight, none more so than the cat sith. A massive black cat with a white blaze on its chest, the cat sith prowled the highlands and islands of Scotland. It was said to walk upright at times, to possess human intelligence, and to steal souls before burial. During wakes, families played music, told stories, and set puzzles, not for comfort, but to distract the cat sith from passing over the corpse. Fires were kept burning, doors were guarded, silence was dangerous. Here again, ritual served survival. Grief alone was not enough. One had to be vigilant even in mourning. Other spirits lingered closer to home. In Ireland and parts of Wales, people spoke of the Grogach small, red-haired household spirits who worked tirelessly for families that treated them well. They were fierce protectors, quick to anger, and utterly loyal. Like the brownie, they demanded respect, not ownership. To exploit them was to lose everything. As belief thinned, some spirits twisted. The bogeyman, now a childish threat, was once a real warning. He was the darkness beyond the firelight, the consequence of wandering too far. Fear was not meant to traumatize, but to teach boundaries. And then there were the kings. In Celtic lore, sovereignty itself was sacred. A king was bound to the land, and the land responded to his worthiness. A bad ruler did not simply govern poorly. He caused droughts, disease, and collapse. When kings broke their sacred bonds, they were cursed. Some became beasts. Others became spirits. A few became legends too terrible to forget. As the old world receded, the Tuatha Dé Danann faded further into shadow. Fairy hills were plowed, stone circles dismantled, bells rang where silence once ruled. Yet the stories did not die. They adapted. Ghosts replaced gods. Demons replaced spirits. Folklore retreated into superstition, into whispers, into children's tales told without understanding their weight. But memory is patient. Even now, people feel unease in certain places, on lonely roads, near dark water, beneath ancient trees. The land remembers its stories even when people do not. Even as the centuries layered themselves over the hills and valleys of Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, the echoes of the unseen never fully disappeared. They lingered in the mists, the rushing rivers, and the twisted roots of ancient oaks. They waited in places where the world seemed quiet, only for the wrong eyes to wander too close. The last of the great fairy hosts, the Sidhe, were no longer conquerors or kings. They had become guardians of memory. Hollow hills became their fortresses, stone circles their council chambers, and the deep, untouched woods their training grounds. They no longer walked openly among mortals, but those with second sight, those attuned to the world's subtle rhythms, could still glimpse their shimmer, shadowed forms half seen at twilight, glimpses of movement in the corner of the eye. The ancient powers did not vanish, they adapted. The Banshee's cry survives in the sudden, unexplainable shiver that runs down the spine, the feeling of impending loss that hangs in the air. The leprechaun still lurks in imagination, his cleverness and obsession with gold now stories whisper to children, warnings of greed and distraction. Brownies and grogosh have faded, but they linger in the small, unremarkable miracles of everyday life. The inexplicable tidiness of a room, the feeling that someone unseen has lent a helping hand. Even the more terrifying beings, Dullahan, Nuckelavee, to Sith, and Arvank, exist now primarily in memory, their legends serving as cautionary tales. They are reminders that the world is larger than it seems, that nature is not entirely ours to command, and that death, loss, and chaos are threads woven into the same fabric as life, growth, and joy. There is a reason why folklore often mingles beauty with horror, wonder with terror. The Celts understood that life itself is a negotiation with forces beyond comprehension. Their tales do not simplify the universe. They illuminate its complexity. Every spirit, demon, and hero carries a lesson. That power, sorrow, cunning, love, and death are inseparable, and that the unseen world is never far from the seen. And so, as the final sun dips beneath the western horizon, casting long shadows over hills and fields, we feel the weight of memory and myth. We realize that while the fairy mounds may be hidden and the otherworld may be veiled, its influence shapes our landscapes, our stories, and even the way we understand ourselves. The Sidhe, the spirits, and the gods of old are not gone. They have simply become a quiet, persistent part of our world. To walk in the Celtic lands is to walk among ghosts and echoes, to feel the presence of the old magic in every rock, river, and tree. It is to acknowledge that the world is alive in ways we cannot always perceive, that the boundaries between life and death, mortal and immortal, are thinner than they seem, and that the stories we tell are themselves a bridge to that unseen realm. So, when the wind whistles through a hollow hill, when a strange light dances across the marsh, or when a sudden chill makes your heart pause, remember this: the old world is still here. It is patient, it is observing, and if you listen closely, you may hear the whispers of a world that has always been, a world that exists just beyond your own. For in the end, Celtic folklore is not merely about monsters, spirits, or magic. It is about memory, morality, and mystery. It is about our connection to the land, to our ancestors, and to the unseen threads that bind all things. And it is a reminder that the unseen, like the wind over the hills, can never be fully tamed. It can only be respected, feared, and sometimes understood. The stories are old, but they are eternal. They wait quietly in the midst of Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. And if you are willing to see them, to hear them, they will speak to you. The water leaper, as it was called, was a creature of chaos, perfectly adapted to its environment. Fishermen described it as a massive legless frog or toad, its leathery wings flaring in sudden bursts to propel it across lakes and rivers. Its eyes glowed with a strange phosphorescent light, and its long, spindly arms ended in hooked claws that could snatch both fish and unwary humans alike. The leaper was not just a predator. It was a symbol of the unpredictable danger of the waters, a reminder that the lake or stream could claim life as easily as it provided sustenance. But even these aquatic terrors had their counterparts on land. In the lonely highlands of Scotland, the mountains echoed with the mournful cries of the sea sith, the fairy hounds of green fur, enormous and spectral, hunting in packs across the moors. Their barks were said to foretell death, a signal to the living that the boundary between the worlds had been crossed. Unlike ordinary hounds, the sea sith were silent hunters until they chose to announce themselves, and to hear even one of their barks was considered a harbinger of unavoidable fate. In Ireland, the forest held other, more deceptive spirits. The puka, a shapeshifter of enormous cunning, could appear as a horse, a goat, or even a human with a sly grin and eyes that glimmered with otherworldly knowledge. The puka was capricious, capable of kindness and terror in equal measure. It might carry a lone traveler swiftly across the countryside, then vanish, leaving them miles from where they had intended to go, or it could lead the unwary into bogs or over cliffs. The puka embodied the duality of the wild, alluring, intoxicating, and potentially lethal. Even more intimate and sinister were the beings who haunted the domestic sphere. Such marks were interpreted as both blessing and warning, an outward sign of the delicate balance between mortal and immortal, ordinary and extraordinary. The otherworld was not always malevolent, nor was it entirely benign. It was a mirror of humanity itself, capable of wonder and cruelty, of generosity and vengeance. Waterfalls, caves, ancient groves, and mist-laden glens were all thresholds, places where a mortal might glimpse beauty beyond imagining or terror beyond comprehension. A simple walk through a forest could become a journey through stories, a test of courage, wit, and humility. Celtic folklore also speaks of heroes who cross these thresholds intentionally. Figures like Cú Chulainn and Finn Mac Cumhaill encountered spirits, monsters, and deities, their deeds weaving the mortal world into the fabric of legend. These stories were more than entertainment. They were guides, showing how humans could navigate the fragile boundary between worlds. Courage, cleverness, respect, and ritual were their tools. Without them, even the strongest could vanish into shadow or madness. And so, the Celtic world teaches a fundamental truth. The land itself is alive, and humans are never its masters, only its guests. Every hill, river, forest, and coastline carries memory and presence. To walk through it with arrogance is to invite calamity. To walk with respect is to touch the extraordinary. As dusk fell, the wind would carry the whispers of the past. The clatter of unseen hammers, the soft padding of ghostly paws, and the laughter of mischief-making fairies would blend with the cries of the living and the dead. In that mingling, one could feel the heartbeat of a world that never truly dies, a world in which the lines between mortal and spirit, reality and story, life and legend, are forever intertwined. And through it all, the message remained. Listen to the land, heed the warnings, honor the unseen, and remember that in the Celtic imagination, every shadow has a story, and every story is alive. Among the most enigmatic of Celtic beings were those that defied simple categorization, creatures neither wholly good nor wholly evil, whose presence tested the hearts of mortals. One such figure was the Dullahan, the headless horseman whose black steed thundered across the hills at night, carrying their own head under one arm. The Dullahan were said to call out the names of those fated to die. When their voice spoke a name, death would follow swiftly. Yet, it was not born of cruelty. The Dullahan were impartial arbiters of fate, reminders that human life is fleeting and destiny cannot be outrun. Some stories tell that leaving a gold coin for the Dullahan could delay their work, a small bargaining with forces beyond mortal comprehension. Then there were the Leonan Sidhe, the muse-like spirits who inspired poets and artists but at a perilous cost. To be visited by a Leonin Sidhe was a blessing and a curse. They granted creativity, beauty, and insight, but often at the expense of health or lifespan. The relationship between human and spirit was intimate, dangerous, and intoxicating, illustrating the Celtic understanding that inspiration is never free. It demands a toll, a reminder that passion and obsession walk a fine line. The marrow, water spirits of the sea, carried a more ambivalent nature. Often depicted with green hair and webbed fingers, they could be playful or deadly. Sailors told of Merrows rescuing drowning fishermen or leading ships to treasure beneath the waves. But they could also summon storms to punish the arrogant or greedy. These beings embodied the sea itself, alluring, unpredictable, and merciless. The Celtic coastlines were alive with their presence. Each cove, an inlet, a potential threshold to an underwater otherworld where mortal rules no longer applied. Not all spirits were monstrous or dangerous in the conventional sense. The Gancana, for instance, was a fairy known for seducing young women, not with violence, but with charm and longing. Encounters with him often left lasting emotional scars, teaching lessons about desire, trust, and the consequences of yielding to temptation. Love, in Celtic folklore, could be as perilous as battle, and passion was often intertwined with magic, shaping destinies in ways beyond human control. Celtic stories also told of spirits who mirrored the natural world, their morality aligned with its cycles rather than human laws. The puka, a shape-shifting trickster, could appear as horse, goat, dog, or rabbit. Sometimes they guided travelers safely through the night. Sometimes they led them astray. Their purpose was not malice but balance. They tested courage, humility, and cleverness, ensuring that mortals did not overstep their bounds. A lesson embedded in the very shape of the land. Those who ignored the world's mysteries risked misfortune. Even the most benign beings carried cautionary wisdom. The brownies, domestic spirits, performed helpful tasks for human households, but demanded respect in return. Neglect or ingratitude could turn their aid into mischief, spoiling food or breaking tools. These tales reflected a worldview in which every action, no matter how small, had repercussions. To honor the unseen was to maintain harmony with the forces shaping life itself. Ultimately, the creatures of Celtic folklore reveal a world alive with intelligence, emotion, and consequence. They were teachers as much as omens, challenging humans to navigate life with courage, respect, and mindfulness. To hear the wind whistle through a hollow tree, to glimpse a shadow moving across a misty hillside, or to notice an ancient stone carved with strange symbols was to sense the presence of a story waiting to unfold. Through every tale, the lesson persisted. The otherworld is never far, and the boundary between human and spirit, mortal and magical, is fragile. Respect the land, honor its inhabitants, and remember that wisdom often comes in forms that frighten, confuse, or bewilder. To live in tune with these truths was to thrive. To ignore them was to invite misfortune, for the world of the Celts was not merely a stage for life. It was a living, breathing entity full of beings that could inspire, test, or punish, always reminding humans of their place within the greater tapestry of existence. Among the heroes of Celtic lore, none were more intertwined with the supernatural than Cuchulainn, the Hound of Ulster. From his earliest days, Cuchulainn was marked by the touch of fate and the presence of otherworldly forces. Trained by the warrior woman Scathack in the misty mountains of Alba, ancient Scotland, he learned skills beyond ordinary men. The ability to strike with unerring precision, to fight with ferocity unmatched, and to call upon the courage of ancestors long gone. Yet even such a hero was never free from the influence of spirits. Legends tell of encounters with the Sidhe, who tested his resolve, offering aid or peril depending on his honor and bravery. Each battle, each decision, was a dance with the unseen, a reminder that heroism was inseparable from the otherworld. Another tale recounts the adventures of Finn Mac Cumhale and his band, the Fianna, who whose lives were intertwined with magic as much as martial prowess. Finn's legendary wisdom came not solely from experience, but from the salmon of knowledge, a mystical creature that granted insight to whoever consumed it. The Fianna often hunted spirits and strange beasts, negotiating with the Fae, and sometimes paying the price for human arrogance. The stories of Finn reveal a society in which courage was not enough. Wisdom, patience, and respect for the unseen were equally vital. Celtic myths also warn of the consequences of angering spirits. The tale of Diarmuid and Grain illustrates this intertwining of human desire and magical influence. When Grain defied her father, the High King, and eloped with Diarmuid, their flight across the land was constantly shadowed by spirits and enchanted forces. Rocks, rivers, and forests became agents of pursuit or protection. Even love, the most human of emotions, was shaped and tested by powers beyond comprehension, proving that the moral and supernatural realms were inseparable in Celtic storytelling. The battlefield itself was often a meeting point between worlds. Heroes like Cu Chulainn were said to feel the presence of spirits in combat, their weapons guided by otherworldly hands. It was common for warriors to offer prayers or small tributes to unseen entities before entering battle. The Celts recognized that courage alone could not shape destiny. The blessings or curses of spirits could tip the balance in life or death. Beyond warriors, the common folk also lived in constant awareness of these forces. Farmers leaving offerings at hilltops or streams, shepherds whispering prayers to the Fae before moving their flocks, and children warned never to stray near ancient cairns were all participants in a world where the ordinary and the magical coexisted. Every stone, tree, or river could be the dwelling of a spirit, and every encounter carried lessons in humility, respect, and attentiveness. These stories collectively reveal the Celtic worldview. Life was a tapestry in which human action, morality, and the supernatural were interwoven. Heroes were not merely strong. They were attuned to the rhythms of magic and the dictates of honor. The spirits were not only adversaries or allies. They were mirrors, testing the hearts of mortals, shaping destinies, and keeping the balance between worlds. Through the lives of Cu Chulainn, Finn, Diarmuid, and countless unnamed mortals, one principle emerges. Courage and skill matter, but wisdom, humility, and respect for the otherworld are the true measures of greatness. Those who heed the lessons of myth thrive. Those who ignore them are often swallowed by the very forces they sought to master. The land itself seemed to pulse with stories of heroism and caution. Among the most renowned was the saga of the Tain Buachailnch, the cattle raid of Cooley, a tale of pride, rage, and the inexorable hand of fate. Queen Medb of Connacht, driven by ambition and desire to match her husband's wealth, launched a massive campaign to seize the prized brown bull of Cooley. Entire armies marched, but the heart of the story lay not in numbers, but in the singular courage of Cu Chulainn, who stood alone to defend Ulster. Cu Chulainn's feats during this campaign were extraordinary. Using his warp spasm, a transformation that made him appear monstrous and unstoppable, he struck fear into the hearts of invaders. Yet these battles were never merely physical. The spirits of the land, the ancestors of Ulster, and the city themselves were ever present, shaping the outcomes. The rivers seemed to part at Cu Chulainn's command, the forests whispered warnings, and the very earth remembered each step. Victory was not merely a matter of strength. It was a reflection of honor, courage, and alignment with forces both seen and unseen. Another tale speaks of the children of Lyre, a story both sorrowful and magical. King Lyre's children were transformed into swans by the jealous stepmother Aoife, condemned to wander the lakes of Ireland for centuries. Here, the moral was clear. Human jealousy and cruelty invoked the power of magic, and suffering could endure for generations. Yet there was also hope, for the eventual release of the children came through faith, patience, and divine timing. The otherworld was not capricious. It demanded respect and fairness, and those who endured hardship with grace were ultimately rewarded. Even love was entwined with enchantment. In the story of Oisin and Niamh, Oisin, a mortal warrior poet of the Fianna, was swept away to Tir na Nog, the land of eternal youth. Time there flowed differently, a reminder that the human and supernatural are not bound by the same laws. When Oisin returned to Ireland centuries later, he found all he had known transformed or lost, a bittersweet testament to the power and peril of crossing between worlds. In these tales, love, loyalty, and longing are inseparable from magic, teaching that human desire is always shadowed by the otherworldly consequences. Even the smallest folk were not exempt. Shepherds, villagers, and wandering travelers were warned never to mock the fae, disturb sacred stones, or wander into mists alone. Tales of the Banshee, whose wailing foretold death, and the Puka, a trickster spirit capable of both mischief and guidance, reminded everyone that life was a delicate balance. Missteps could bring ruin, yet acts of kindness or respect could invite protection and fortune. These stories collectively illustrate the Celtic worldview in full color. Heroism and morality, human ambition and supernatural consequence were inseparable. Each choice, each act of bravery or folly, resonated through the tapestry of life, guided by unseen hands and ancient laws. The landscape was alive with memory, morality, and magic, a constant teacher of humility and courage. The sagas, whether of warriors, enchanted lovers, or ordinary folk, always return to a central truth. The world is alive, attentive, and responsive. Every hero, every mortal, must navigate the delicate threads of fate, honor, and unseen forces. Those who understood this balance flourished. Those who ignored it often vanished in a legend, remembered only as warnings or cautionary tales. And so, from the green hills and shadowed forests of ancient Ireland to the mist-laden coasts and sacred stones of Scotland and Wales, the stories endured, a living testament to a people for whom life and magic were never separate, and every choice echoed beyond the veil of the ordinary. The Celtic lands were never empty. Beyond the fields and forests, across rivers and cliffs, dwelled beings whose presence was as real as the wind in the trees. These were not mere myths, but entities that shaped the daily lives, fears, and hopes of the people. Among the most feared and revered were the Sidhe, the fae folk who lived in hills, mounds, and other hidden realms. They were guardians of ancient knowledge and secret treasures, capable of immense kindness or terrifying vengeance, depending on the respect shown to them. The Banshee was perhaps the most haunting figure, often described as a pale woman with long, flowing hair and a mournful cry. Her wail foretold death in a family. Yet the Banshee was not evil. She was a messenger, a bridge between the mortal world and the unseen. Families would listen for her lament, not with panic, but with solemn recognition of life's impermanence. In a land where mortality was ever present, from harsh winters to battlefield losses, her cries were a reminder to honor the bonds of family and the cycles of life. Then there were the Puka, tricksters and shapeshifters of unmatched cunning. They could bring fortune or calamity, often appearing as black horses, goats, or even human travelers with uncanny eyes. Farmers leaving a gate open or travelers straying into a misty glen risked their interference. But those who offered respect, even a simple gift, could earn the Puka's favor. Many stories warned that to underestimate the Puka was folly, for their mischief could undo a season's harvest or guide one safely through treacherous terrain, depending on whim and virtue. The leprechaun may be the most famous today, yet in ancient lore, these beings were guardians of wealth and craftsmanship. Shoemakers of the fae, they delighted in creating and hiding treasures, rewarding cleverness and punishing greed. Stories tell of mortals attempting to capture a leprechaun to gain its gold, only to be outwitted, reminding people that wealth, like magic, is earned through ingenuity, patience, and respect. Other spirits took subtler forms. The fairy lights of marshes and bogs could lure travelers to safety or peril. Sacred wells and springs were inhabited by water spirits, whose blessings brought healing, but whose wrath could drown the unwary. Even common animals were believed to carry omens. A raven might herald doom, while a hare crossing one's path could signify opportunity or transformation. Magic and mortality intertwined in everyday life. People built homes and raised livestock while mindful of the unseen forces. Stones and circles were left undisturbed. Offerings of food or drink might be left for spirits to ensure protection. Festivals, such as Samhain, marked times when the veil between worlds thinned, when fae could walk among humans, when ancestors could visit. These were times of caution and celebration, acknowledging that life was never fully in human hands that I in this world. Courage and wisdom were inseparable. Warriors like Cuchulainn faced not only mortal enemies, but supernatural tests, and common folk navigated a landscape alive with memory and sentience. Respect, humility, and honor were not just moral virtues. They were survival skills, allowing humans to coexist with a world that was alive, watching, and infinitely old. Thus, the Celtic imagination was never idle. Its stories, songs, and oral traditions were practical, moral, and magical. They taught that every hill, river, and tree was a repository of lessons, warnings, and wonder. Life and myth flowed together, inseparable, creating a world where heroism, sorrow, love, and fear were all threads in a living tapestry of the unseen and the known. The Celtic year was not measured solely by the passage of time, but by the turning of seasons and the cycles of nature. Each festival was a bridge between the mortal and the mystical, a moment when humans acknowledged their place in a world alive with spirits, deities, and fae. Among these, Samhain stood as the most profound. As autumn faded and the veil between worlds thinned, communities lit bonfires to guide the departed and to ward off malevolent spirits. Offerings of food and drink were left on thresholds and hearths, and the living honored ancestors whose presence lingered nearby. It was a liminal time, both fearful and sacred, when futures could be glimpsed in fires or in the flight of birds, and when the boundary between life and death felt porous. Equally vital was Beltane, a festival of fire and fertility that celebrated the renewal of life as spring emerged. Cattle were driven between flames to protect them from disease, and humans danced around maypoles to honor the union of earth and sky. The flames of Beltane were believed to hold protective power, cleansing the land and those who approached it with respect. Such rituals were not merely symbolic. They were acts of survival, blending spirituality with practical care for crops, livestock, and community well-being. Imbolc, in early February, marked the first signs of returning light. It was a festival dedicated to Bridget, goddess of poetry, smithcraft, and healing. Fires were kindled in her honor, and wells and springs were blessed with offerings to ensure fertility of the land and livestock. The rituals of Imbolc reminded people that even in the harsh midwinter, life stirred quietly beneath the surface, waiting for warmth, for growth, for renewal. The Celts also marked the solstices, moments when the sun reached its peak or its nadir. Midsummer, or Lugnasad, was a celebration of abundance, named for the god Lugh. Communities feasted, raced, and competed in skill and strength, offering the first fruits of harvest to deities and spirits. Conversely, the winter solstice was a time of reflection and endurance, when stories of heroism, sacrifice, and ancestral wisdom were shared around the hearth, reinforcing identity, morality, and memory. Through these festivals, the people of the Celtic world maintained a delicate harmony with the unseen. Offerings, songs, dances, and sacrifices were ways to communicate, to ask for protection, and to show gratitude. The natural world was never inert. It was imbued with power, caprice, and consciousness. Every river, hill, grove, and stone held a spirit, and every act of reverence strengthened the invisible bonds that tethered humans to the land. In the end, the Celts understood that life was not a linear journey but a cyclical dance. Birth, growth, decline, and death were mirrored in the turning of seasons. The unseen world was never a mere backdrop. It was a participant, a teacher, a guardian, and sometimes a trickster. Those who walked this earth with eyes and hearts open could see the threads of magic woven through the ordinary, recognizing that the extraordinary was never far from daily life. It was a world where stories were more than stories. They were maps, warnings, guides, and prayers. Through them, the Celts preserved their history, honored their ancestors, and navigated the complexities of existence in a land alive with power and mystery. Among the hills and valleys of ancient Celtic lands, heroes were not merely men and women of strength. They were bridges between the human and the supernatural, embodiments of ideals, fears, and the mysteries of life itself. Their stories were sung by bards and passed down through generations, carrying both instruction and warning, weaving history with legend so that no one could separate the mortal from the magical point. One such figure was Cuchulainn, the Hound of Ulster, whose ferocity in battle was matched only by his devotion to honor and loyalty. From his boyhood, marked by extraordinary feats, to the tragic events of his adult life, Cuchulainn was a symbol of the thin line between glory and doom. His battles were not just fights against men, but struggles against destiny itself. In his frenzy of war, called a Ryestrad, he became almost unrecognizable, a force of nature that transcended the limits of the human body, reminding all who heard his tale that courage often demands more than mere survival. It demands surrender to something larger than oneself. Equally revered were the mighty women of Celtic myth, whose influence extended beyond the battlefield. Figures like Medb, Queen of Connacht, embodied sovereignty, cunning, and unyielding ambition. Her strategies shaped entire kingdoms, and her story challenged the notions of power, gender, and the moral codes of her time. Women like Medb were not passive observers. They were architects of fate, wielding authority as decisively as any sword or spear. The hero's deeds were never isolated from the supernatural. Spirits, gods, and fey creatures often intervened, testing courage, loyalty, and ingenuity. The Tuatha Dé Danann, deities and magical beings, walked alongside mortals, offering blessings, imposing trials, and sometimes punishing hubris. To face a hero in Celtic myth was to confront the unknown, the forces of nature, the spirits of the land, and the inexorable pull of destiny. A warrior's skill with sword or spear was meaningless without wisdom, intuition, and reverence for the unseen. Bards, poets, and storytellers were as crucial as warriors, for they preserved the deeds of the legendary and shaped the lessons they carried. Through epic tales like the Táin Bó Cúailnge, communities learned the values of courage, loyalty, honor, and the consequences of pride. These stories were living instruments, sung in mead halls, whispered at firesides, and carved into memory, binding communities to both past and future. In the end, Celtic heroes were mirrors, reflecting human potential and limitation, courage and folly, mortality and connection to the eternal. To walk in their stories was to understand that life was a tapestry of action, consequence, and interaction with forces far greater than any individual. They were not only champions of their people, but symbols of the intertwined world of the seen and unseen, reminding every listener that heroism was not defined merely by victory, but by how one navigated the delicate balance between destiny and choice. The world of the Celts was never solely human. Every forest, river, and hill seemed alive with presence, and the unseen often held as much sway over life as kings and warriors. Among these beings, the Fae were perhaps the most enigmatic. Neither wholly benevolent nor entirely malicious, they existed in a liminal space, sometimes helpers, sometimes tricksters, always unpredictable. Their power was rooted in nature itself, and their moods could change with the seasons, the weather, or even a passing insult. Some Fae were small, almost imperceptible, like the brownies of Scottish legend, who would aid households in secret, working diligently at night to keep the home and hearth in order. but disrespect them or fail to offer their customary gift, and their helpfulness could turn to mischief or malice. Others, like the Sidhi, were taller, nobler, and more terrifying, ethereal warriors, guardians of ancient mounds and sacred groves, who could bestow great gifts or unleash devastating curses depending on the human encounter. Then there were the Banshees, harbingers of death, whose mournful wails foretold the passing of those touched by fate. Their cries were said to echo through valleys and across rivers, chilling the blood of those who heard it, reminding humans that life and death were inseparably entwined with the natural and spiritual worlds. Unlike monsters meant to be slain, the Banshee was a messenger, a bridge between the living and the departed, a presence demanding respect rather than conquest. The seas and rivers were no less magical. Selkies, beings who could shift between human and seal form, were said to wander the coasts, their songs echoing across waves. Lovers and adventurers who encountered them learned both wonder and heartbreak. For Selkies were never entirely bound to the human world, their loyalty forever tied to the wild, untamed ocean. Similarly, Kelpies lurked in rivers and lochs, shape-shifting water spirits that could appear as horses or humans. They lured the unwary, drawing them into watery depths, serving as a reminder that beauty and danger often existed side by side. Even the land itself was considered sentient. Ancient groves, stone circles, and sacred springs were believed to hold spirits or deities. To cut a tree without asking, to disturb a mound, or to take from a spring without offering tribute, was to risk curses, misfortune, or eternal wandering. Humans and the supernatural were entwined in a delicate dance. The balance was never guaranteed, and wisdom lay in knowing when to act and when to defer to powers beyond mortal comprehension. Through these interactions, humans learned the laws of respect, courage, and humility. A hero might wield the mightiest sword, but survival often depended on listening to the whispers of the Fae, observing the signs in the wind, or honoring the spirits of the land. Celtic mythology did not separate heroism from harmony. It taught that greatness required understanding the world not as a collection of objects to conquer, but as a network of forces to navigate with care. The rhythm of life for the Celts was tied inexorably to the seasons, each marking not just a change in weather, but a shift in the balance between the seen and unseen. Festivals were not mere celebrations. They were gateways, times when the veil between worlds thinned and humans could glimpse the power of the Fae, the ancestors, and the spirits that lingered in the shadows. Samhain, the most feared and revered of these festivals, marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of winter. It was a time when the earth seemed to grow silent, the trees shedding their leaves as if whispering secrets to the wind. Fires were lit on hilltops to guide wandering spirits, and offerings of food and drink were left at thresholds to appease those who might cross into the mortal world. Masks and costumes served a dual purpose. They honored the spirits while also protecting humans from the mischievous or vengeful beings that roamed freely in the liminal night. Imbolc, in contrast, was a festival of light, heralding the first stirrings of spring. It was a time to honor Brigid, goddess of fertility, hearth, and inspiration, asking for protection, creativity, and the renewal of life. Homes were cleaned and candles lit, symbolically chasing away the darkness of winter and inviting the blessings of the growing sun. These rituals reminded humans that life and magic were cyclical, and that hope must always be renewed even in the bleakest seasons. Beltane celebrated the peak of spring and the power of fertility, growth, and fire. Communities danced around towering maypoles, flames leaping as symbols of vitality and protection. It was believed that on these nights, the Fae were particularly active, mingling with the living, influencing fortunes and testing human resolve. To honor the unseen, offerings of milk, honey, or small trinkets were placed in fields and forests, a pact of respect between mortal and otherworldly realms. Lugnasad, the first harvest festival, was a time of gratitude and appeasement. It honored Lugh, god of skill and craft, celebrating both human achievement and the bounty of the earth. Festivals included games, feasts, and sacrifices, a blending of joy and reverence, acknowledging that survival required not just strength but humility before the forces that shaped life itself. Through these festivals, humans learned to read the signs in nature: the wind, the moon, the growth of crops, or the strange behavior of animals. Omens were everywhere, guiding decisions and shaping destinies. A hero might consult the flight of birds before battle, interpret dreams sent by the fae, or offer gifts to spirits of the land to ensure favor. In every action, ritual, and gesture, the boundary between human and supernatural was acknowledged, honored, and respected in the Celtic worldview. The world was alive, layered with mysteries that demanded both courage and caution. Magic was never distant. It was woven into daily life, teaching that the extraordinary was never far from the ordinary. The forests whispered secrets, rivers carried omens, and even the wind could bear messages from realms unseen. Humans who failed to listen were often humbled, sometimes fatally. Those who understood the delicate balance between respect, wisdom, and bravery were remembered in stories, songs, and legends. Amid the rolling hills and shadowed forests of ancient Celtic lands, heroes arose, not merely from strength of arm, but from courage, wisdom, and a touch of the supernatural. Their stories were never simple tales of conquest. They were entwined with the unseen forces, the fae, and the spirits of ancestors who watched, guided, or tested them. One such hero was Kieran of the Silver Oak, a warrior whose fate was marked by an omen at birth. A raven perched upon the roof of his home, its black eyes reflecting both warning and promise. As he grew, it became clear that he was no ordinary man. He could sense the presence of the fae, feeling their whispers in the wind and their laughter in the rustle of leaves. Elders whispered that he carried a gift of the otherworld, but with it came great peril. Kieran's first trial came when his village was threatened by a band of marauders, men who respected neither law nor land. On the night before the attack, Kieran ventured into the forest, guided by the whispers of the fae. Deep among the trees, he encountered an ethereal figure cloaked in silver light, a guardian spirit of the forest. "The battle will test more than your strength," the spirit warned. "Your heart, your cunning, and your respect for the unseen will decide the outcome." The next day, as the marauders descended, Kieran led his people not with brute force, but with strategy inspired by visions from the forest. Hidden paths, clever traps, and a timely use of fire turned the tide. Yet, it was the fae's intervention, a sudden fog, the illusion of phantom warriors, that ensured victory. The village survived, and Kieran's reputation grew, though he knew the true debt he owed was to the unseen forces he had honored. The most legendary trials, however, came not from human foes, but from encounters with the fae themselves. These beings could be beautiful or terrifying, capricious or wise. They tested heroes with riddles, illusions, or moral dilemmas. A misstep could bring ruin, but a single act of honor or courage might earn blessings that no mortal weapon could provide. Kieran learned to walk the line between worlds, always cautious, always aware that magic was neither friend nor enemy. It was a force to respect. Battles, both mundane and magical, were chronicled in epic sagas, songs that passed from mouth to mouth around fires, ensuring that deeds were remembered even when those who performed them were long gone. The stories taught more than bravery. They illustrated the fragile balance between humans and the natural and supernatural worlds. A hero's strength was measured not by the number of foes defeated, but by the harmony maintained with the unseen forces that shaped life. As Kieran's fame grew, so too did his understanding of the deeper truths of the land, that every stone, river, and tree carried memory, that destiny was woven like threads in a tapestry, and that the line between triumph and tragedy was often drawn by a whisper, a shadow, or a choice made in the quiet hours of night. In the Celtic imagination, this was not a world of accidents. It was a living, breathing cosmos where the bravery of one could ripple across generations and the favor of the Fae could turn the tide of history. Kieran had grown accustomed to the rhythms of the mortal world, yet the pull of the other world was relentless. Whispers in the wind, glimmers in moonlit ponds, and shadows that moved with purpose all beckoned him beyond the familiar hills and forests. One evening, guided by a silver stag that seemed to glow with its own light, he entered a hidden vale where the air shimmered like liquid moonlight. It was here that Kieran crossed the threshold into the Fae realms, a world both wondrous and perilous. Trees towered impossibly high, their leaves glowing in colors he had never seen. Rivers ran with water that sparkled like stars, and creatures, some beautiful, some grotesque, watched him from beneath roots and stones. Time in this realm moved differently. Hours could stretch into days, and days could vanish in an instant. The first to greet him was Aelith, the keeper of thresholds, a fae of such beauty and menace that Kieran's heart both feared and revered her. "Mortal," she said, her voice a melody that seemed to echo inside his chest. "You tread where few dare. Why do you seek the unseen?" "I seek understanding," Kieran replied, "and the strength to protect my people. I wish to walk with honor in both our worlds." Aelith's eyes glimmered like the surface of a pond in sunlight. "Honor is a fragile thing here. Many come seeking power and leave broken, their souls trapped in shadow. You will be tested, Kieran of the Silver Oak. You will face your fears, your desires, and the truth of who you are. Only then will you find what you seek." His first trial was one of the heart. Kieran was led to a hall of mirrors, each reflecting not his body, but moments from his life, choices he had made, regrets he carried, paths not taken. Some mirrors whispered temptations, revenge against those who had wronged him, shortcuts to glory, and power that would make him untouchable. Others showed the pain his actions had unintentionally caused. Kieran understood that the trial was not about fighting an enemy, but confronting himself. He moved carefully, touching mirrors that spoke of courage and mercy, stepping away from those that promised selfish gain. The hall seemed to shift around him, and the whispers faded, leaving only clarity. He had passed the first test, not by skill, but by wisdom and restraint. Next came a trial of courage. A dark forest within the Fae realm opened before him, filled with shadows that took the forms of creatures from his deepest fears. A marauder from his past, a beast with teeth of silver, and even reflections of his own doubts. Each shadow lunged, not to kill, but to force him to confront the limits of his bravery. Kieran fought, not with his sword, but with presence of mind and the courage in his heart, turning fear into clarity and shadow into understanding. By the time he emerged, he was changed. His eyes carried the light of one who had faced the depths of the otherworld and returned unbroken. Aelith awaited him at the veil's edge. "You walk between worlds now," she said, touched by the unseen. "Remember, Kieran, the greatest battles are not fought with steel alone, but with the strength of the spirit." Kieran nodded, knowing that the journey ahead would be longer and stranger than anything he had yet faced. Beyond the veil lay kingdoms of Fae, spirits of ancestors, and trials that could test both his humanity and the balance between the mortal and magical realms. Yet he walked forward, guided by courage, wisdom, and a bond with the unseen forces that would shape the fate of his people, and perhaps the world itself. Beyond the shimmering veil, Kieran came to the court of the Summer Fae, a place of dazzling light and intoxicating warmth. Golden leaves drifted lazily through the air, and laughter, both musical and mischievous, filled the space. Yet beneath the beauty lay a tension he could feel in his bones, a subtle undercurrent of cunning, ambition, and unspoken rivalries. The court was ruled by Queen Ilystri, a radiant fae whose presence commanded attention without effort. Her eyes, like molten amber, seemed to see not only Kieran's body, but the very essence of his soul. "Welcome, mortal," she said, her voice like wine through sunlit leaves. "You walk where few of your kind dare. Tell me, what do you seek in our realm?" "I seek understanding and guidance," Kieran replied, bowing respectfully, "and to learn how to protect my people, who are threatened by forces they cannot see. Eilistri's lips curved into a smile that was both kind and unnerving. Many seek power here. Few seek wisdom. The path you walk will test your loyalty, your patience, and your heart. But it will also show you truths your world cannot offer. She gestured, and the court's Fae attendants presented trials of diplomacy and discernment. Kieran had to navigate conversations filled with half-truths, subtle manipulations, and illusions designed to ensnare the unwary. He realized quickly that in the Fae court, words could be sharper than swords, and a careless promise might bind him forever. During one test, a Fae named Lorien, with eyes like sapphire and a sly grin, challenged him to a riddle contest that lasted the length of a night. Each riddle carried consequences. Failure would not mean death, but loss of memory or a fragment of his soul. Kieran relied not only on knowledge, but on intuition, patience, and his ability to read intention behind words. By dawn, he had solved the final riddle, earning not only respect, but a talisman of insight, which would allow him to see deception more clearly in the future. Yet the most dangerous challenge was temptation. The court offered pleasures of the senses, feasts that never left hunger, music that could twist emotions, and visions of glory in his own realm. Every delight came with a subtle demand, a promise, a favor, or a small piece of his essence. Kieran understood that to indulge was to lose himself. He restrained his desires, drinking only water and partaking in modest food. Keeping his mind cleared be why the time the sun, or what passed for sun in the Fae realm, rose. Kieran had won the tentative trust of the summer court. Eilistri approached him once more. You walk a dangerous path, mortal. Many who enter our realm are seduced by beauty, lost in power, or ensnared by pride. Remember this, the truest strength lies in balance. Honor, courage, and wisdom, these will guide you when the unseen seeks to unmake you. With the court's blessing, Kieran left, carrying knowledge, caution, and the first true taste of Fae politics. He now understood that the Otherworld was not simply magical. It was a realm of influence, where intentions were more potent than swords, and truth was as fragile as a spider's web. As he journeyed deeper into the Fae lands, Kieran sensed that the next trial would be even greater. The court of the Winter Fae, where shadow, cunning, and cold ambition reigned. He knew that crossing their threshold would demand not only courage, but cunning, and perhaps a willingness to confront the darkest corners of his own heart. The path to the Winter Court was lined with frost-coated trees, their branches like brittle fingers clawing at the sky. Mist clung to the ground in thick swirls, and the air smelled of iron and snow. Even the faintest sound seemed amplified, echoing unnaturally through the stillness. Kieran's breath formed clouds that hung in the air like ghostly spirits. He could feel the presence of the Winter Fae long before he saw them. Silent watchers, their eyes cold as ice, judging every step. The Winter Court was ruled by King Calethorn, a figure of stark, commanding presence. His hair was like spun silver, his skin pale as frost, and his eyes were deep, glacial blue, cold yet piercing. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. "Mortal," he said, "you have walked the lands of warmth and light. Now you enter shadow. Many fear us. Few endure. Tell me, why should the Winter Court grant you passage?" Kieran straightened his posture and met the king's gaze. "I seek to understand all realms, not to conquer them. I wish to protect my people, to learn, and to prepare for threats they cannot see." A faint smile, like a crack in ice, touched Calethorn's lips. "Then you walk wisely. But words alone will not suffice here. In my court, the cold reveals the hidden. Strength alone is meaningless. Fear and doubt are the instruments of power. You must endure trials that strip away pride, illusion, and the illusions of safety." The first trial was a labyrinth of mirrors, each reflecting not Kieran's physical self, but memories, fears, and unspoken regrets. As he navigated the twisting halls, he confronted visions of failure, his family harmed by unseen forces, his village destroyed, himself broken by doubt. Shadows whispered temptations. Promises of power if he abandoned his mission. Offers to erase pain or fear in exchange for obedience that Kieran's heart raced. But he relied on the lessons of the summer court. Discernment, patience, and inner balance. Each time a shadow whispered, he named it for what it was: fear, desire, or doubt, and stepped forward. Slowly, he found the exit, leaving illusions behind, yet carrying the weight of lessons learned. Next came the trial of cold truths. Calethorn summoned spirits of those who had crossed the winter court and failed. They spoke not with malice, but with quiet inevitability, showing Kieran visions of the consequences of pride, arrogance, or weakness. He realized that the winter phase realm demanded humility and foresight, for even a small misstep could become a tragedy that echoed across both Fae and mortal worlds. Finally, Kieran faced the test of loyalty. Calethorn presented him with a choice: a vision of his village under attack by an unseen, malevolent force, and a chance to intervene immediately by sacrificing a fragment of his own essence to gain temporary power, or to refuse, trusting that the lessons he was learning would allow him to help in the long term. The vision was harrowing: screams, fire, shadowy figures moving through the night. That Kieran's hand hovered over the offered power, but he hesitated. Then he remembered Ilistri's words: the truest strength lies in balance. Honor, courage, and wisdom. With a steady voice, he refused the temptation. I will not trade my soul for fleeting control. I will face the danger, but I will do so on my own terms. Calethorn's eyes glimmered. Wise mortal, few possess such restraint. You have passed the trials of shadow and frost. Take this knowledge. Power is hollow without restraint. Fear is a tool, but loyalty and wisdom are shields stronger than any blade. Kieran left the winter court carrying a crystal of foresight, allowing him to glimpse dangers before they arrive, though only as hints, never full certainty. He understood that the journey ahead would require not only courage, but strategic thinking, alliances, and the ability to act in the unseen spaces between worlds. As he emerged into the twilight between realms, Kieran felt the weight of what he had gained, and the knowledge that the greatest challenges were still to come. For beyond winter and summer, there were other courts, darker forces, and hidden threats, and he had only begun to scratch the surface of the Fae world's true complexity. The air grew neither warm nor cold as Kieran stepped through the veil separating the winter and twilight courts. The sky above shimmered in hues of violet and gold, constantly shifting, never settling. Shadows moved like living silk, stretching and twisting, sometimes forming shapes that vanished the moment he looked directly at them. This was the Twilight Realm, a place between day and night, where truth and illusion blurred, and every whisper could be both guidance and deception. Kieran sensed immediately that the Twilight Fae were unlike those of summer or winter. They were elusive, their motives layered and often hidden, their loyalty to no one but the balance itself. From the mists emerged Lady Eloria, the mistress of twilight, her eyes reflecting both dusk and dawn simultaneously. Her smile was enigmatic, and her voice seemed to echo from every direction at once. "Mortal," she said, "you have endured fire, shadow, and frost. Yet the twilight reveals what others hide: secrets, lies, and intentions. Here, perception is your weapon and your weakness. Are you prepared to see what others cannot?" Kieran nodded. "I am prepared to learn and to act wisely." Eloria waved her hand, and the world shifted. He found himself in a maze of infinite corridors, each leading to rooms filled with visions of the Fae world and the mortal realm. Some rooms showed moments of triumph, others moments of betrayal. Kieran quickly realized that each choice he made in one vision altered the sequence of what he saw next. One wrong step could trap him in endless illusions. The first test was the labyrinth of motives. He encountered versions of his allies and enemies, each presenting conflicting desires. One image of his mentor whispered warnings, while another promised forbidden power. Shadows of unknown origin tried to sway him, twisting reality so that he could not trust his senses. Kieran remembered the lessons from summer and winter: discernment, patience, and knowing when to act. He closed his eyes, reaching inward rather than outward, relying on intuition rather than appearances. Slowly, he traced a path that felt true, stepping forward only when he was certain of the consequences. Each choice honed his perception, teaching him to read subtle truths beneath surface deception. Next came the trial of reflection, where the Twilight Fae forced him to confront hidden aspects of his own character. He saw glimpses of ambition that could corrupt, fears that could paralyze, and doubts that could betray him to enemies both mortal and fae. The realm whispered, "What will you become if no one watches?" Kieran faced each reflection without flinching, acknowledging flaws but refusing to be consumed by them. Finally, Eloria brought him to the Chamber of Secrets, a vast, dimly glowing hall filled with floating orbs, each containing knowledge of events unseen by mortals. "Here," she said, "you may glimpse threats before they emerge, but beware. The more you know, the heavier the burden." Kieran approached carefully. He touched an orb, and a vision unfolded, a shadow spreading across the mortal world, led by unseen forces manipulating both fae and humans alike. The vision was fragmented, like a puzzle with missing pieces. Kieran understood that knowledge alone would not be enough. He would need strategy, alliances, and subtle influence to protect his people. When he withdrew, Eloria nodded, her smile inscrutable. "You have seen without being deceived, judged without condemning, and acted with wisdom. Few mortals endure the Twilight Realm and leave unchanged. Take this gift." From her hand, a small, luminescent pendant of perception materialized. When worn, it allowed Kieran to sense hidden motives, subtle lies, and concealed dangers, but only in glimpses, never fully, and never without effort. It was a tool of insight, not omniscience, reminding him that truth must be sought, not assumed. As Kieran exited the Twilight Realm, he felt the weight of understanding pressing on him. Between summer, winter, and now twilight, he carried the lessons of courage, restraint, and perception. Yet even with these gifts, he sensed that the true enemy, the shadow behind the looming threat, remained hidden. Somewhere beyond the realms he had traversed, the dark fae stirred, patient and cunning, watching mortal and fae alike. Kieran knew that the next stage of his journey would demand not only strength and wisdom, but a mastery of intrigue, alliances, and the art of moving unseen through both worlds. Kieran returned to the mortal lands, but the world he knew felt different, sharper, thinner, as if the veil between the human realm and the fae world had grown fragile. Villages seemed quieter, forests darker, and the wind carried whispers that were almost, but not quite, words. The pendant of perception rested against his chest, warm and pulsing faintly, reminding him that unseen eyes were watching. He first sought out Ewan, a seasoned hunter and old ally who had aided him in the past. Ewan had sensed the shift too. "Something moves beneath the surface," he said grimly, scanning the horizon. "Animals vanish, crops wither without cause, and the river smells of iron in places it shouldn't." Kieran nodded. The Twilight Realm revealed a pattern. Forces are working through intermediaries, fae agents disguised, acting in shadows. The Dark Fae are already manipulating mortal affairs. Their suspicions were confirmed within days. A small hamlet to the north reported strange disappearances. Children vanished from their beds, leaving behind only faint traces of glimmering dust, the hallmark of fae interference. Kieran and Ewan rode through the night, following the trail of ethereal residue that only the pendant could highlight. The path led deep into the ancient forest of Draen, where twisted trees formed natural corridors that seemed alive. There, they encountered their first direct threat, a darkly cloaked fae agent, half shadow, half human, with eyes that gleamed crimson. It moved with impossible speed, striking with illusions that made it appear in multiple places at once. Kieran raised his pendant. The artifact flared, revealing the agent's true form and trajectory, allowing him to anticipate its attacks. Steel clashed against shadow. Ewan's arrows struck true, but the agent seemed to dissolve, reform, and vanish at will. Kieran realized brute force alone would not prevail. He had to combine perception with cunning, using the environment, misdirection, and careful timing. Drawing on the lessons of the Twilight Realm, he created illusions of his own, moving silently, striking only when the agent's position was fully revealed. After a tense, grueling confrontation, Kieran lunged with a steel dagger tipped with Fey-forged silver, piercing the agent's heart. It let out a chilling, echoing scream, then dissipated into a cloud of black mist that lingered like smoke, whispering, "This is only the beginning. We are everywhere." The battle left Kieran shaken. He realized the Dark Fae were not a single enemy, but a network of operatives spreading influence across both mortal and Fae realms. Every victory might only be a delay. Every secret uncovered could invite retaliation. Returning to the village, Kieran addressed the gathered elders. The darkness we face is patient and cunning. We cannot fight blindly. We must train, unite, and act with both vigilance and subtlety. The Fae are not all our enemies, but even allies may be tempted or coerced. We must prepare for a war that will test not only strength, but wisdom and trust. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the hills, Kieran felt the weight of responsibility settle upon him. The pendant pulsed faintly against his chest, a reminder that the road ahead would require keen perception, relentless vigilance, and the courage to act where others cannot. The Dark Fae were patient, but so was he, and every shadow he navigated, every secret uncovered, brought him closer to understanding their ultimate plan. From the distance, a faint whisper carried on the wind. Soon, the veil will shatter. Are you ready to bear what comes? Kieran tightened his cloak, gripping the pendant. He had faced fire, frost, and shadow, and now he would confront a darkness that could consume both worlds if left unchecked. Kieran knew he could not face the Dark Fae alone. Their agents were everywhere, some disguised as villagers, merchants, even traveling minstrels. He began seeking allies, not only among humans, but among the less malevolent Fae, those who had grown wary of the encroaching darkness. His first stop was the glen of the Seelie Court, hidden deep within the northern woods. The Seelie, guardians of balance and light, were wary of humans, especially those meddling in Fae affairs. Yet, when Kieran revealed the extent of the Dark Fae's manipulation, the elders listened. "The mortal realm is fragile," said Lady Branna, a Fae of shimmering silver hair and eyes like liquid moonlight. "If the shadows extend their influence, both our worlds will bleed. But alliances are fragile. Fae pride and mortal stubbornness have ended far too many pacts in betrayal." Kieran met their conditions. He agreed to aid the Seelie in unmasking rogue Fae within the mortal realm to help maintain balance while forging a coalition. In return, Lady Branna promised guides, spies, and magical support, though only in subtle forms. The Seelie would not fight directly unless forced. Meanwhile, Kieran sent word to human leaders, warriors, and scholars he trusted. A small but determined group gathered. Hunters skilled in tracking supernatural creatures, herbalists versed in protective wards, and scholars who could read the ancient glyphs that sometimes appeared in Dark Fae markings. As they prepared, omens began appearing across the land. Rivers ran black at dawn, livestock vanished without trace, and storms twisted unnaturally, as if the elements themselves were responding to the Dark Fae's will. Kieran realized that the enemy's reach was not merely physical, but also magical, warping nature and bending perception. One night, while the coalition camped in the forest, Kieran sat by a small fire, studying the pendant. It pulsed faintly, and for the first time, he noticed a pattern in the rhythm. Each pulse seemed to respond to events occurring far away, almost as if the pendant could sense the Dark Fae's movements before they happened. "Perhaps it's not only a tool of perception," he whispered, "but a beacon of strategy, a way to anticipate their plans before they unfold. The first test came sooner than expected. A village to the east was besieged, not by raiders, but by an unnatural fog that twisted paths and induced hallucinations, drawing people into the woods where the dark fae waited. Kieran and his allies raced to intercept, using the pendant to navigate the false trails and illusions. The battle was chaotic. Shadows moved like living smoke, attacking with whispers that could turn fear into madness. Yet Kieran and the coalition held together. The Sea guides used subtle magics to distract and weaken the dark fae's illusions, while human warriors struck decisively where the shadows thinned by dawn. The fog lifted, leaving the village shaken but intact. Survivors spoke of fleeting glimpses of shapes half-human, half-beast, vanishing into the woods, confirming that the dark fae were actively recruiting mortal agents. Kieran understood the stakes. This was no longer a war of isolated incidents. The dark fae were building a network, a hidden army blending shadow, magic, and human ambition. To stop them, he would need more than courage and skill. He would need knowledge, trust, and the cunning to fight an enemy that could manipulate minds and bend reality itself. As the sun rose, painting the forest in gold, Kieran clenched the pendant. The dark fae are everywhere, he said to his companions. But so are we, and if we act wisely, we can make the shadows hesitate, falter, and finally break. In the distance, unseen by mortal eyes, a figure watched from the treetops. Cloaked in darkness, the emissary of the dark fae whispered to itself, "They are gathering, and we will test them, for the reckoning draws near." The following days were tense. Kieran's coalition moved cautiously, following the pendant's pulses as they traced the dark fae's influence. Villages they passed were uneasy, whispers of strange occurrences trailing them like a shadow. Some villagers spoke of friends vanishing in the night, only to return days later changed, eyes hollow and voices strange. Kieran gathered his closest allies in a secluded clearing. "Something is controlling them," he said, showing the pendant. "The dark fae are not just hunting. They're reshaping people to serve their will. We cannot fight this like a normal war. Every ally could be an enemy tomorrow." The group nodded solemnly. Among them was Omen, a seasoned hunter, and Lyra, a scholar of old magic. Both had seen enough horrors to trust their instincts. "We need to know what they want," Lyra said. "There's a reason they're collecting these people, and until we uncover it, we're fighting blind." Their opportunity came sooner than expected. One evening, while camping near a ruined watchtower, the pendant glowed violently. Its pulses were frantic, almost frantic. Kieran followed the signal into the tower, stepping over broken stones and vines. In the shadowed center, he found a glyph etched into the floor, glowing faintly with a black light. Lyra knelt beside it, tracing the markings. This is a binding sigil. Whoever stands on it can control the minds of those connected to it. They're using it to dominate mortals and possibly weaker fae. Suddenly, a figure stepped from the shadows. It was one of their own scouts, a young woman named Mairead who had vanished 3 days prior. But her eyes were not her own. They were silver, empty, controlled. She advanced silently, a twisted smile on her lips that Kieran's heart sank. "No, Mairead," he shouted. Omen stepped forward, bow drawn. "We can't fight her unless we sever the connection." Lyra studied the sigil. "There's a counterbinding, but it's dangerous. Whoever disrupts it risks being linked themselves, and it may alert the dark fae to our presence." Kieran knew there was no choice. If Mairead reached the rest of the village, dozens more would fall. He took a deep breath, grasped the pendant, and stepped into the circle. The energy hit him like a wave, disorienting, whispering threats in 1,000 voices. He focused on his own memories, his friends, his home, the anchor that tethered him to himself. With a sharp cry, he shattered the sigil. Light erupted from the floor, scattering shadows and sending Mairead collapsing, freed but shaken. Around them, the forest seemed to exhale, the unnatural tension lifting slightly. Lyra helped Mairead to her feet. She's alive, but we've only delayed the dark fae. They'll know we're getting closer. Kieran clenched the pendant, feeling its warmth and weight. Closer, yes. But now we know something important. They need people under their control for a reason. And if we uncover that, we can strike at the heart of their plan. From the treetops, unseen, the dark fae emissary observed the scene, its expression unreadable. They are cleverer than expected. Very well, let the games begin. Kieran and his coalition moved forward, knowing that every step brought them closer to the heart of the darkness, and closer to the revelation that would decide not just their fates, but the balance of both human and fae worlds. The forest seemed to change as they moved. Trees twisted unnaturally, shadows stretching longer than they should, and the wind carried whispers that weren't quite human. Even season trackers like Omen grew uneasy. Lyra studied the pendant closely, tracing its faint pulses. "It's leading us somewhere," she said, her voice low. "The rhythm changes when we approach areas of stronger dark fae influence. We're getting closer to their lair, or whatever they're using as a base." Kieran felt a shiver run down his spine. "Closer, but I don't know if I want to know what we'll find." That night, they made camp near an abandoned stone bridge. Mairead stayed quiet, still shaken from the sigil's control, her silver eyes now returning to their normal brown. But as they ate their meager rations, Eamon noticed her hands tremble. "Kieran," he whispered, "I don't trust it. People who've been controlled before, some never fully recover. What if she's still connected?" Kieran studied her. "She's herself, but I feel it too. The pendant saved her, but that connection doesn't just vanish. We need to keep watch, and she must understand the danger." Before he could speak further, a rustling came from the trees. Arrows flew, narrowly missing them. Shadows leapt from the branches, creatures that were neither fully human nor fae, twisted by the dark fae's corrupt magic. The battle was sudden and brutal that Aemon's bow sang through the air. Lyra cast protective wards, and Kieran used the pendant to shield their minds, preventing the creatures from entering their thoughts. Mairead fought alongside them, though her movements were hesitant, unsure of her own strength. After the last shadow fell, Kieran sank to his knees. "They're stronger than I imagined, and they know we're coming." Lyra frowned, examining the pendant. "It's reacting. Something is calling us. A place far to the north, hidden in the hills. That must be their stronghold, or at least the source of this dark influence." The next day, they set out, moving carefully through the twisted wilderness. As they approached the northern hills, the pendant's pulses grew frantic, almost like a heartbeat. And then the first real test came. Not from outside, but from within their own group. One morning, Mairead disappeared. At first, they thought she had wandered off, but soon they realized the pendant's glow dimmed sharply whenever they tried to locate her. Panic rose in the group. "She's gone taken?" Lyra asked, fear creeping in her voice. Kieran's eyes narrowed. "Not just taken. She's been drawn by something or someone. The dark fae are testing us. And I have a feeling the next choice we make could cost us everything." The pendant thrummed urgently in his hand, almost as if it were screaming. It led him to a narrow ravine, the air thick with unnatural fog. Deep within, Mairead's voice called out, soft and pleading. But beneath it was another sound, a low, alien resonance, pulling at their very thoughts. Kieran realized with a cold certainty, the heart of the dark fae's power was near. And this time, the danger wasn't just physical, it was mental, spiritual, and moral. Every step forward would challenge their courage, their loyalty, and their very humanity. The ravine yawned before them, like the gaping mouth of some ancient beast. Mist curled along the jagged rocks, and the faint pulse of the pendant guided Kieran with a rhythmic urgency, almost like it was dragging him forward against his own will. Lyra and Eamon followed cautiously, weapons drawn, eyes scanning the fog. Every shadow seemed alive. Every whisper carried a hidden warning. Mairead's voice echoed again, this time faint, fragmented, as if it were being distorted by the very air around them. "She's close, but something's wrong. Lyra muttered. Kieran gritted his teeth. It's a trap. The dark fae always lure their prey with what they desire most. But we don't have the luxury to hesitate. I'm going in. He stepped into the fog first, pendant raised. The pulse grew stronger, almost unbearable. And with each step he felt a pressure against his mind, as if invisible hands were trying to twist his thoughts, bending reality itself. Suddenly, the ground gave way, and Kieran plunged into a hidden cavern below. The others barely managed to grab the edges, pulling themselves down after him. The cavern was vast, walls glimmering with veins of strange, black crystal that seemed to drink the light. In the center, Mairead knelt on a raised platform, her eyes wide, silver once more, glowing faintly as if touched by another presence. And standing before her was a figure cloaked in darkness, its face obscured. Its voice echoed, both in the cavern and inside their minds. "Welcome, seekers," it said. "You've come far, but at a cost. To save her, you must sacrifice a piece of yourselves." Kieran's heart sank. The dark fae had taken Mairead and now demanded more than strength. They demanded moral obedience, trust, and inner truth. "What do you want?" Kieran growled, gripping the pendant tighter. The shadowed figure tilted its head. "Truth, fear, desire. Choose what you will give, for only through offering can she be freed. But beware, each choice shapes you, bends you, some never return as they were." Mairead's voice trembled. "Kieran, Lyra, Eamon, I feel it, they're inside my mind. I can barely hold on." Lyra stepped forward, anger and fear in equal measure. "We won't let you touch her. Whatever it costs us, we face it together." But the figure's laughter filled the cavern, a sound like shattered glass scraping stone. "Together? You misunderstand. Unity will betray you. Only those willing to confront their darkest truths may pass unscathed. Step forward or lose her forever." Kieran's mind raced. Each step forward might cost a memory, a secret, a part of his soul. Yet hesitation would cost Mairead's life. He glanced at his companions. Eamon's hands were shaking on his bow. Lyra's lips were pressed tight, her eyes blazing. Mairead's faint glow flickered in desperation. Kieran swallowed his fear. "Then we step forward," he said, voice steady despite the turmoil. "Together, or not at all." The cavern seemed to pulse with anticipation, the black crystals reflecting their fears as if alive. One by one, they approached the platform, and the first test began, not a fight of strength, but a trial of the heart, where every hidden fear and desire would be laid bare before the dark fae. The cavern walls seemed to breathe as they stepped closer to the platform, the black crystals pulsing with each heartbeat. The air was thick, heavy, and it pressed against their minds like a tide of invisible hands. Kieran went first. The moment his foot touched the edge of the platform, the pendant burned against his chest, and his mind was flooded with memories, some he had long buried. Faces of those he had failed, moments of weakness, the times he chose self-preservation over courage. "Face it," the shadowed figure whispered directly into his thoughts, though its lips never moved. "Which truth will you relinquish?" Kieran staggered, vision blurring as a wave of guilt and doubt crashed over him. And then he realized the pendant's light was not guiding him. It was showing him what he must release. I cannot save everyone," he murmured, tears welling. "But I can choose to save her. I let go of the fear that I must be perfect." The darkness recoiled slightly, as if tasting his truth, and the cavern's pulse slowed. A faint light began to shine from Mairead, a flicker of hope in the oppressive gloom. Lyra stepped forward next. Shadows wrapped around her like serpents, hissing secrets she had never spoken. Failures, betrayals, lies told to protect herself. "You cannot hide," the figure murmured. "Will you relinquish your pride, your armor?" Lyra's hands trembled on her sword. She thought of the countless times she had turned away, the moments she had let others suffer while keeping her own reputation untarnished. I give up my need to control everything," she whispered, voice firm despite the shiver running through her body. I trust you, Kieran and Eamon. I trust that this will end right. The shadows hissed but shrank back slightly. The light in Mairead's eyes brightened, her silver glow spreading like liquid moonlight across the cavern. Eamon was last. Fear seized him. Memories of lost comrades, of failure, of a cowardice he had buried deep within. I've always run from what scares me most, he admitted, knuckles white on his bow. I offer my fear, my hesitation, my guilt. The shadows seemed to twist and coil around him, testing him, clawing at his mind. But with one deep breath, he stepped fully onto the platform. The figure's laughter rang out again, less menacing this time, more like a distorted applause. So be it. You have faced your truths, and for now, you may proceed. Mairead's glow erupted fully, washing over the cavern and shattering the oppressive shadows. The black crystals cracked, releasing a chorus of ringing that reverberated in their bones. But even as relief swept through them, the shadowed figure whispered one final warning. This is only the beginning. The deeper path awaits, and the price will grow heavier. Kieran tightened his grip on the pendant. Whatever it takes, he said, voice resolute. We go deeper. We save her. We end this, together. The cavern floor shifted, revealing a spiral staircase carved into the stone, descending into darkness even older than the mountains above. The air smelled of ancient earth and distant storms, and the pulse of the pendant quickened again, guiding them downward into the heart of the Fae's lair. And with each step, they could feel the presence of the dark Fae, watching, waiting, testing. The spiral staircase seemed endless, curling downward like a serpent devouring its own tail. Each step they took echoed in the cavern, though the sound was distorted, almost alive, as if the stone itself were breathing. Mairead floated slightly ahead, her silver light casting fractured shadows that danced across the walls. But even her glow seemed to struggle against the darkness. The deeper they descended, the heavier the air became, thick with the weight of ancient magic. Suddenly, the pendant on Kieran's chest pulsed violently, forcing him to clutch it. The shadows from before returned, but this time they were tangled in forms resembling their own fears, each one whispering, twisting memories into illusions. Lyra saw herself striking down innocents in battle, screams echoing as she relived the moments she had acted in cold calculation. Eamon saw the faces of comrades lost, not just in battle, but to his hesitation, to moments he had done nothing while fear held him back. Kieran saw Mairead, but the glow in her eyes was cold and distant, accusing him silently of every failure he had carried. The whispers coalesced into a single voice, hissing, "You carry your truths, yet still you falter. Who are you if not these lies?" Kieran clenched his teeth. "We are more than our failures," he shouted, though his voice trembled. "We are what we choose to do next." The shadows shrieked and lunged at them, but Mairead's light flared, creating a barrier of silver fire. The illusions writhed and screamed, then dissolved like smoke under sunlight. The staircase finally ended at a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness, walls lined with jagged black crystals, each one throbbing like a heartbeat. In the center floated a pool of liquid night, smooth and reflective, yet absorbing all light. From it a shape emerged, tall, impossibly thin, cloaked in shadows that moved like living smoke. Its eyes glowed red, like molten rubies, and its voice shook the chamber. "Welcome, intruders. You have passed the trials of truth. But now, the trial of essence begins. What will you give to claim her life?" Eamon's hands shook as he drew his bow. "We give everything," he said, almost instinctively. "We give our courage, our hearts, our lives if we must." Lyra stepped forward, sword drawn, light reflecting off its silver edge. "We won't turn back. Not now. Not ever. We face this together." Kieran held the pendant to his chest, and for the first time, its glow matched Mairead's fully. Together, the three of them formed a triangle of silver light, radiating defiance. The shadowed figure from before floated closer to the pool, its gaze piercing. "Defiance is fleeting. Sacrifice is eternal. Will you endure the final trial? Mairead's voice rang clear in their minds. Trust in each other. That is the key. And then the pool's surface rippled, pulling the shadows into twisting, living forms, monsters born of their deepest fears. Each one reflected what they feared losing most, and the chamber grew alive with the hiss of darkness. The final battle had begun. The shadow-formed monsters emerged from the pool, their shapes ever shifting, reflecting not only their fears, but also the doubt that had haunted them for years. The tallest of them towered over Kieran, its arms stretching into jagged spikes of darkness. The air around it shimmered with malevolence, making every breath taste of ash and regret. Lyra tightened her grip on her sword. "We face them together," she shouted, her voice carrying across the chamber like a clarion call. "Do not falter." Amon's bow sang as arrows of silver light streaked through the air, striking shadows that dissipated into smoke, only to reform moments later. "They keep coming," he yelled. "It's like fighting ourselves." Kieran raised the pendant high. Its glow spread, washing over the chamber in a blinding silver light. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in unison, but one particularly massive form advanced, swallowing the light like ink in water. Its shape was horrifyingly familiar. It took the form of Mairead, but twisted, her eyes hollow and cruel. "No," Kieran gasped. "She's not like that." Mairead's voice cut through the darkness, calm and resolute. "It's a reflection of what they want you to fear. Remember who I am, not what they show." Kieran closed his eyes and focused on her memory, the moments they had shared, the laughter, the trust, the light. The pendant's glow shifted, stronger now, forming a shield that encased the trio. The shadow of Mairead hesitated, its form trembling against the silver aura. Lyra struck forward, her sword slicing through a cluster of smaller shadows. Each contact burned away fear, replacing it with clarity. Amon followed, releasing arrows imbued with the light of conviction, piercing illusions and freeing trapped fragments of themselves. The giant shadow shrieked and twisted, writhing in rage. "You cannot deny me," it howled, echoing through the chamber. "All will fall to despair. Not us." Kieran roared, stepping forward, pendant ablaze. "We are more than fear. We are more than doubt. We are ourselves." The silver light from the pendant surged, engulfing the chamber. The shadow-formed Mairead screamed, splintered, and then vanished, leaving the real Mairead floating above the pool, radiant and untouched. The remaining shadows, now leaderless, faltered and began to dissolve into harmless smoke, carried away by the chamber's strange wind. The pool of liquid night stilled, its surface smooth and calm. The towering shadow figure that had greeted them before now bowed its head, acknowledging their triumph. Its voice was softer, almost reverent. "You have faced your truths and prevailed. The path you chose was never easy. But courage, unity, and love, these are stronger than all shadows." Mairead descended, her light merging with the pendant, binding the glow into a soft radiance that filled the chamber. "It's over," she said, her hand resting on Kieran's shoulder. "We made it, together." For the first time since their journey began, the chamber felt safe, almost alive with a quiet warmth. The shadows were gone, the monsters vanquished, and only the faint pulse of ancient magic remained, humming like a heartbeat beneath the stone. Kieran looked around at his companions, breathing heavily but smiling. "We've endured and we've won. Not just for her, but for all of us." Lyra nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. "And we'll carry this with us. What we've learned here, the strength we've found, it's ours now, forever." Amon smiled faintly. "Let's leave this place. There's nothing left for shadows to take." Together, the three of them stepped toward the staircase that would lead them back to the surface. The chamber, once a prison of fear, now seemed like a memory fading into the light. A test of essence, courage, and heart that they had passed, bound by trust and unbreakable unity. But even as they climbed, The faintest ripple across the pool hinted that not all shadows are gone, and that some truths still wait in the corners of the world, waiting for those brave enough to face them. The staircase spiraled upward, the air growing lighter with each step. For the first time in what felt like days, Kieran, Lyra, and Eamon could hear the wind outside, carrying the scent of grass, rain, and freedom. The chamber below faded into shadow, its echoes of fear now distant, almost like a half-remembered dream. When they finally emerged, the world above was not as they had left it. The forest stretched before them, but the trees were twisted, their branches reaching like fingers into the sky. The stream shimmered with an unnatural silver light, and in the distance, mountains seemed sharper, more ominous, their peaks piercing the clouds like daggers. "This isn't right," Lyra whispered, scanning the horizon. "Something changed while we were below." Eamon frowned, tightening his grip on his bow. "It's not just the forest. Look at the sky. It's alive, almost like it's watching us." Kieran held up the pendant, now a steady, calm light. The chamber wasn't the end. It was only a threshold. Whatever force created the shadows, it's not gone. It's here, in the world above, waiting. A sudden rustle in the trees made them all freeze. From the shadows emerged figures cloaked in black mist, their faces hidden, but their presence unmistakably hostile. They moved with unnatural grace, like wolves stalking prey, but their eyes glowed with the same voided light they had seen below. "They've come for what we carry," Mairead said, appearing beside them, her voice firm yet tinged with worry. "The pendant, our courage, it's a beacon for them." Before Kieran could respond, one of the figures stepped forward. Its voice, cold and echoing, reverberated in their minds. "You have proven yourselves in the trial below, yet the world above is not yours to claim. Darkness does not forgive, and light does not protect those who falter." Lyra stepped in front of Kieran. "We don't falter. We survived what you couldn't imagine." The mist-shrouded figures paused, as if considering her words. Then, in unison, they lunged, leaving the trio barely time to ready themselves. Kieran's pendant flared, pushing back the first wave of shadow. But more were coming. Faster, smarter, their forms shifting to exploit fear and doubt. One turned into a perfect reflection of Eamon, bow raised, arrow nocked. Another became a twisted version of Lyra, her sword dripping shadows. "Keep your focus," Mairead called, raising her hands as her light radiated outward. "They feed on hesitation." Kieran closed his eyes and thought of all they had endured. The trials, the shadows, the fear. He let their triumphs empower him, channeling the pendant's full brilliance. The shadows screamed as the silver light expanded, forming a dome of radiance that cut through the mist. But this time, unlike before, the light did not destroy the shadows. It revealed them. Their true forms were not monsters, but echoes of the world's corrupted magic, creatures shaped by imbalance and fear, not evil. Understanding this, Lyra struck with purpose, Eamon shot with precision, and Mairead's light healed the corrupted energy, purifying it rather than annihilating it. Slowly, the mist began to disperse, revealing the forest in its natural, untwisted form, though faint ripples of the lingering corruption remained. The figures vanished, leaving only the faint echo of their voices. "This is not over. Darkness waits." Kieran exhaled, trembling but resolute. "We did it for now." Mairead placed a hand on his shoulder. "Yes, but the world above is a battlefield too. We've only glimpsed what we're up against. Darkness adapts, evolves, and it won't stop." Eamon sheathed his bow, glancing at the horizon. "Then we adapt too. We fight, we survive, and we protect this world from what lies in its shadows." Lyra nodded, her eyes fierce but steady. "Together, no matter what comes next." Above them, the sky cleared, revealing the first true rays of dawn, golden and hopeful. Yet somewhere beyond the forest, the faintest ripple of shadow lingered, a silent reminder that the trials below were only the beginning. The journey was far from over. The dawn light stretched across the forest, painting the trees in gold and green. For a brief moment, the world seemed peaceful, but the memory of the shadows below and the lingering ripple in the air reminded them that the calm was only temporary. Kieran adjusted the pendant around his neck. Its glow was steady now, almost like a heartbeat. "We need to know where this corruption comes from," he said. "If we only fight the echoes, we'll never end it." Mairead nodded. "There's a place far to the north, an old temple hidden in the mountains. It was once a sanctuary for those who guarded the balance of light and shadow. If it still exists, it may hold answers." Eamon frowned, scanning the tree line. Mountains in winter, forests twisted with residual magic. That's not going to be easy. And if the corruption spreads, who knows what we'll face along the way. Lyra sheathed her sword but kept her hand near the hilt. "Then we move carefully, step by step. We've survived worse." They set out, following a narrow path that wound through the forest. The trees seemed ordinary now, but every shadow felt alive, as if watching, learning, waiting. Small animals darted between the roots, but even they moved with an unnatural caution. By midday, they reached a clearing, and the ground beneath them trembled. A fissure had opened in the earth, glowing faintly with the same silver light as the streams they had seen earlier. From it rose a faint, whispering voice, almost human but distorted, repeating, "Balance must be restored." Kieran stepped closer, pendant glowing brighter. "It's calling to us, but why?" Mairead knelt by the fissure. "This is residual energy. The corruption isn't just in the forest, it's part of the land itself. Whatever force created the shadows has tainted the very earth." Eamon glanced toward the horizon, the distant mountains jagged against the sky. "Then the temple may not just hold answers. It might be the key to stopping it." They continued, moving cautiously along the path. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the air grew thin and cold. Snow began to fall, and each step became heavier, slower. By nightfall, they reached a frozen ridge overlooking the valley below. And there, half buried in ice and stone, they saw it, the temple, ancient and crumbling, yet radiating a faint, pulsing light. Strange symbols were carved into its walls, some glowing, others dark and fractured. Lyra exhaled. "This is it. This is where we find the truth, and maybe the power to stop the shadows for good." Kieran tightened his grip on the pendant. "Then we go in together. No hosatashchen. Whatever waits inside, we face it as one." As they stepped toward the temple entrance, the wind whispered through the mountains, carrying a voice both ominous and familiar. "The balance is fragile. The end has not yet come." The adventure was far from over. Inside the temple, secrets older than the forest itself awaited them, and with them, a choice that could change the fate of the world above and the shadows lurking just beyond. The temple loomed before them like a memory frozen in stone, its steps half buried in ice, the walls scarred by centuries of wind and time. The air was sharp and still, carrying an almost electric hum. Each step forward made the whispers from the fissure earlier grow louder, now threading through their minds like a distant song, both haunting and commanding. Eamon led the way, his boots crunching in the frost. "Stay close. Watch everything. Nothing here is ordinary." As they crossed the threshold, the temple interior revealed itself. A vast hall, its ceiling arched with stone ribs resembling the spine of some enormous creature. Ancient murals lined the walls, depicting figures who seemed half human, half shadow, locked in endless struggle. Some figures glowed with light, others twisted into darkness, so deep it almost seemed to swallow the glow around it. Mairead ran her fingers over one of the carvings. These were the guardians, but something went wrong. The balance they protected failed. A low rumble echoed through the hall, and shadows stirred along the walls. From the darkness ahead, a figure slowly materialized, tall, humanoid, but its edges seemed to dissolve into smoke. Its eyes burned with a pale silver light, reflecting the pendant in Kieran's hand. Lyra drew her sword. "Show yourself. We mean no harm unless you give us reason." The shadow figure tilted its head, Voice a whisper like wind through the mountains. You carry the light of the old world, yet your hearts tremble with doubt. Why should I let you pass? Kieran stepped forward, pendant raised. We seek to restore balance. The corruption spreading through the forest, the mountains, it's the same darkness that destroyed this place. We won't let it consume the land. The figure's form shivered, flickering between solid and smoke. Many have said such words, and all have failed. The path is not of courage alone. It demands truth and sacrifice. Mairead exchanged a glance with Eamon. We've come this far. Whatever test this is, we face it. The shadow raised an arm, and suddenly the floor beneath them glowed, projecting visions into the air above. A swirling storm of light and shadow, of past guardians, of villages and forests consumed by creeping darkness, and a lone figure, a child, standing in the center, holding a glowing crystal, untouched by shadow. Lyra gasped. That child. It's like the beginning of everything. The figure's voice grew firmer. You see the truth of balance, yet can you bear it? To restore what was broken, one must embrace both light and shadow, and the choice will define all that comes after. Kieran's grip on the pendant tightened. We're ready. Tell us what we must do. The shadow hesitated, then stepped aside, revealing a narrow passage descending deeper into the temple. Its voice, now softer, echoed, then descend. Face the heart of the corruption. Only there will the path to balance be revealed. But beware, the darkness is alive. It tests every step. The group exchanged determined glances. One by one, they stepped into the passage, leaving the hall behind. The air grew warmer as they descended, the walls carved with more intricate symbols that pulsed faintly in rhythm with the pendant. And deep within, at the very heart of the temple, something ancient stirred, an intelligence older than the forest, waiting for challengers who dared to touch the fragile scales of fate. The passage twisted downward like the coil of some enormous serpent, the walls narrowing and dripping with condensation that smelled faintly of iron and moss. Every step felt heavier, as if the air itself weighed on their lungs. The pendant in Kieran's hand pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat, guiding them deeper into the darkness. At last, they reached a chamber, a vast, circular cavern, the ceiling lost in shadows above. In the center of the room lay a black pool, perfectly still, reflecting not their faces, but something else. Distorted versions of themselves, eyes hollowed, expressions twisted by doubt and fear. A whisper rose from the water, echoing in the chamber. Face yourselves, or be devoured by what you deny. Mairead's voice trembled. It's showing our fears. Eamon stepped forward, gripping his staff. Then we faced them, one step at a time. The water rippled violently. From its depths, shadows began to rise, coalescing into humanoid forms. They mirrored the group exactly, but their movements were exaggerated, cruel, and mocking. Lyra's shadow advanced toward her, sword raised, eyes burning like coals. You will fail, it hissed. You are weak. You cannot save what is lost. Lyra tightened her grip on her sword. I'm not afraid of you. She lunged, but the shadow lunged back, moving faster than her reflexes could follow. Kieran stepped into the fray, pendant raised high. A beam of silver light shot from it, striking his shadow twin. The dark version recoiled, but did not vanish. Instead, it multiplied, splitting into 3, then 6, each whispering doubts, each echoing fears long buried. Mairead realized something. The light alone won't destroy them. It's not just power, it's truth. We have to acknowledge them. One by one, they faced their shadows not with strikes, but with words. Lyra spoke to her shadow. I know your fear, but I am not you. I carry the courage you lack. Kieran said to his, You are my doubt, my hesitation, but I choose action, not fear. Eamon confronted his with steady eyes. You are the part of me that fails. I honor you, but I will not let you control me. Mairead whispered, almost to herself. You are my grief, my guilt. I release you. As each shadow was acknowledged, it began to shimmer and fade, dissolving into mist. The pool in the center rippled violently, then stilled once more, now reflecting only their true faces, calm and determined. The air lightened, the oppressive weight lifting slightly. Yet at the very edge of the chamber, a faint shape began to stir, a larger shadow, unlike the others. Its form was immense, writhing, and filled with a presence that seemed to consume the room. It spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "You have faced yourselves, but now you will face me. I am the corruption that devours the heart of the world. Step forward, and your choices will either mend what is broken or be swallowed forever." The group exchanged a glance. There was no hesitation this time. They stepped forward together, knowing that the trial had only just begun and that the heart of darkness awaited them in the chamber's center. The shadow at the chamber's edge surged forward, filling the cavern with an unnatural chill. Its shape was never constant, sometimes like a giant, twisted tree, other times like a mass of writhing serpents, all eyes and mouths. Every heartbeat of the group echoed through the cavern like a drum of warning. Lyra raised her sword, its steel gleaming faintly in the pendant's silver light. "It feeds on fear," she said, her voice firm despite the cold gnawing at her bones. "We must stay united." Aemon extended his staff, chanting low, ancient words that seemed to ripple through the stone walls themselves. The shadow recoiled slightly, but only momentarily. It was as if it knew their words weren't mere magic. They were defiance. Mairead's hands glowed faintly with a soft, golden light. "It thrives on what we regret," she murmured. "We need to give it nothing." Kieran stepped forward, pendant held high. Its pulse quickened, brightening with a rhythm that matched their own hearts. "Then we face it, not as separate pieces, but as one." The shadow lashed out suddenly, tendrils of darkness sweeping across the floor like liquid night. The group dodged, barely avoiding its grasp. Lyra slashed at one tendril, and as it dissolved into smoke, she realized that each strike or spell wasn't enough. They needed to act in concert. Aemon whisper plan. "Circle it. We attack not with force alone, but with the bond we share. Every shadow it creates, every doubt it hurls, we counter together." They moved as one, each action echoing the others. Lyra's sword swings drew arcs of light. Aemon's spells traced patterns in the air that glowed like runes. Mairead's hands healed and shielded their movements, and Kieran's pendant pulsed, feeding them strength. The shadow screamed, a sound that was neither human nor animal, but a grinding void of despair. It split again, trying to isolate them, to prey on their fears individually. But every time it did, they formed a tighter circle, their combined light, and were striking it back, forcing it to retreat. Slowly, painfully, the massive, writhing shape began to solidify into something smaller, less monstrous, its form still dark, but less chaotic. And in its eyes, the group saw something that startled them. Recognition. It knew them, knew their courage, their bonds, their truth. You are not just fear," it hissed. "You are defiance. You are..." Before it could finish, Kieran's pendant blazed with blinding light, and the chamber shook. The shadow let out a final, echoing wail, then collapsed into a pool of harmless mist at their feet. The cavern stilled, the oppressive chill lifting entirely. Lyra lowered her sword, breathing heavily. "Is it over?" Mairead shook her head slowly. "I think we've only passed one trial, but we've proven something. That darkness, no matter how vast, cannot prevail over unity and truth." Aemon nodded, "And that gives us hope. The path ahead may be darker still, but we have the strength to face it together." The pool of mist at their feet shimmered faintly, leaving behind a faint glow that marked a new passage leading further downward. The adventure was far from over, but for the first time, they stepped forward not with fear, but with resolve. The new passage stretched before them, narrow and winding, carved from stone that seemed older than time itself. The glow from the shadow's remnants faded slowly, leaving only the faint shimmer of minerals in the walls to light their way. Lyra led, sword ready, eyes scanning every crevice. "Stay alert," she whispered. This place, it's not done testing us. Mairead's hands trace the walls, her golden light faintly illuminating hidden glyphs etched deep into the stone. These symbols, she murmured, they're warnings but also guidance. Whoever, or whatever, built this place wanted it to be survived only by those worthy. Eamon's voice was calm but serious. Worthy, yes, but also brave. The heart of this corruption lies deeper. And from what I can sense, it's alive in more ways than one. Kieran's pendant pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat. He held it closer to his chest. The closer we get, the stronger its presence. Not all of it is evil. Some of it is trapped and angry. As they descended, the air grew thick, almost viscous, carrying the scent of something long decayed. Shadows clung to every corner, though none dared approach as long as the group remained together. Then, without warning, a voice echoed, soft, sorrowful, and strangely familiar. "You should not have come." The words made their skin crawl. Lyra stepped forward, her sword raised. "Show yourself." A figure emerged from the darkness ahead, a being humanoid but warped, half shadow, half light. Its eyes glowed a pale amber, filled with centuries of sorrow. "I am the heart of this place," it said, "the source of the corruption you seek to end. I was once like you, but the greed and fear of the world above twisted me, bound me here." Eamon's eyes narrowed. "Then we can free you, if you allow it. We can break the chains without destroying you." The figure let out a bitter laugh, echoing through the stone corridors. "Freedom comes at a cost. Are you prepared to pay it? Are you prepared to face truths you do not wish to know?" Lyra's grip tightened on her sword. "We've faced fear, darkness, and doubt already. Whatever it is, we will not turn back." The shadowed figure stepped closer, and with it, the walls themselves seemed to pulse with life, glowing faintly along the carved glyphs. "Then know this," it whispered. "The corruption you see is only the surface. The true darkness lies in what humans hide from themselves, and only those who confront their own hearts can end it." A sudden surge of wind knocked them off balance, carrying whispers of regrets, failures, and lost hopes. Each of them staggered, struggling to maintain focus as the shadows twisted into visions of their own past fears. Mairead's light flared brightly, banishing some of the illusions, while Eamon chanted, his voice steadying their hearts. Lyra felt the weight of her own regrets pressing against her, memories of past failures threatening to paralyze her. But she took a deep breath, anchoring herself to the group. Kieran's pendant flared violently, and the figure's form wavered. Together, he said firmly, "We face it together." And in that instant, the group realized that the trial wasn't just the figure before them. It was themselves. The battle ahead would not only be for the world, but for their very souls. The heart of the corruption awaited deeper in the labyrinth. And for the first time, the group stepped forward, not as frightened travelers, but as warriors ready to confront the true darkness within. And without, the labyrinth fell silent. The shadows that had once writhed and whispered were gone, dissolved by the courage and unity of those who faced them. The figure, once twisted by sorrow and corruption, now stood free, its form no longer half shadow, but whole, serene, and at peace. Lyra sheathed her sword, feeling the weight of the journey lift from her shoulders. Mairead's light shone softly, reflecting not just off the walls, but from the hope rekindled in their hearts. Eamon and Kieran exchanged quiet smiles, knowing that what they had faced was more than a battle. It was a reckoning, a test of the human spirit. As they stepped out of the labyrinth into the fresh air of the world above, the winds carried with them a sense of renewal. The sun rose slowly, casting golden light across the hills and valleys, a promise that even in the darkest places, courage and unity could prevail. They had entered as seekers, uncertain and afraid. They left as guardians, forever changed, their bond forged in the fires of shadows and truth. And though the world outside would not always remember the battles fought in silence, those who had faced the darkness knew some stories do not need to be told. They're lived. And so, the journey ended, not with an echo of fear, but with the quiet, unshakable light of hope.